Rick once said, "The universe is basically an animal. It grazes on the ordinary. It creates infinite idiots just to eat them." And those idiots? They're watching the weirdest Rick and Morty episodes to fall asleep to right now. From a world where everyone has butts for faces to a reality where time moves at different speeds, these are the episodes that'll make your brain work harder right before it completely shuts down for the night. And I'm going to walk you through each one of them, one bizarre interdimensional cable channel at a time. What if I told you there's a dimension where people watch TV with their eyelids and dream the commercials? That's not actually in the show, but it sounds like something that could happen in Rick and Morty's vast multiverse. The interdimensional cable episodes are like the perfect gateway for anyone trying to fall asleep to this show. They have this weird quality where they don't demand your full attention, but somehow keep you just interested enough to forget about your day. These episodes are super unique because they don't have a traditional plot. Rick hooks up a special cable box that accesses TV from infinite realities, and the family just sits around watching these bizarre clips from other dimensions. There's no story to follow, just random snippets of the weirdest stuff you can imagine. You don't have to worry about keeping track of character arcs or plot points. It's just pure randomness, which works surprisingly well when you're trying to drift off. What makes these segments so dreamlike is that most of them are actually improvised by Justin Roiland, who voices both Rick and Morty. The animators then create visuals around his random ramblings. This gives everything this loose, stream of consciousness feel that perfectly matches what our brains do right before we fall asleep. Nothing needs to make sense, and that's kind of the point. The improvised nature means the dialogue flows in this weird, unpredictable way that feels like a dream, where one idea just flows into another without logical connections. The segments vary wildly in length and tone, too. Sometimes you'll get a 5-second commercial for something completely ridiculous, and other times you'll get a longer sketch that builds into absolute absurdity. This unpredictable pacing actually works perfectly for sleep because it prevents your brain from establishing a pattern it can latch onto. Your mind stays just engaged enough without being fully alert, which is the sweet spot for drifting off. One of the most iconic segments is Ants in My Eyes Johnson, a commercial for an electronics store where the owner has, well, ants in his eyes. The way the character repeats his condition over and over while surrounded by chaotic visuals creates this hypnotic effect. His monotone voice combined with the repetitive nature of the commercial almost functions like a weird form of counting sheep. The same goes for Real Fake Doors, which is literally just a guy trying to open doors that don't open, then driving home in real time while telling you the doors still don't open. It doesn't make any sense, but the repetitive nature becomes strangely soothing. What's really interesting is how the random nature of channel surfing in these episodes mimics exactly how our brains jump between thoughts as we're falling asleep. You know those moments when you're almost asleep and your mind is just floating from one random thought to another? That's basically what watching interdimensional cable feels like. You might be watching How They Do It Plum Buses one minute, and then suddenly you're watching Ball Fondlers the next. There's no rhyme or reason, just like our pre-sleep thought patterns. Inside all this apparent chaos, there are actually some hidden patterns. The commercials often feature characters who are deeply flawed or dealing with existential crises, but they're just going about their business like everything's normal. This creates this weird sense of comfort in the uncomfortable. It's like the show is saying, look at all these messed up realities where people are just getting by, which is strangely reassuring when you're lying in bed overthinking your own problems. So which segments work best for actually falling asleep? It's the ones with repetitive visuals and monotone voices that create this unexpected ASMR effect. Personal Space features a host who just keeps listing increasingly obvious facts about personal space in this flat, consistent voice. Turbulent Juice repeats the same nonsensical phrases over and over with this rhythmic quality. Even Two Brothers, with its escalating absurdity, has this narrator who maintains the same tone throughout, creating a sort of audio consistency that works well for sleep. What these segments all have in common is that they create a kind of mental white noise. They're engaging enough to distract you from your own thoughts, but not so engaging that they keep you wide awake, trying to follow along. The animations are often simple and the color palettes tend to be consistent within each commercial, avoiding those bright flashes or sudden movements that might jolt you back to alertness. There's something about the low-stakes nature of these segments that makes them perfect for nighttime viewing. Nothing really matters in interdimensional cable. There are no consequences, no ongoing storylines, no emotional investment required. It's just pure, absurd entertainment that lets your brain slowly disconnect from reality as you drift off to sleep. As strange as interdimensional cable is with its random assembly of bizarre TV clips from throughout the multiverse, even this chaos follows certain patterns our sleeping brains can recognize. But if you want to experience something even more dreamlike, we need to explore how memories themselves can create the strangest sleeping experiences in an episode that questions reality itself. Imagine waking up surrounded by people you're absolutely certain you've known your whole life, except they never existed until today. That's basically the premise of Total Recall, an episode that creates the most dreamlike experience in the entire Rick and Morty series. The Smith family suddenly finds themselves with all these supposed longtime friends and family members who they have memories of, but who are actually alien parasites implanting fake memories in their heads. It's this concept that makes the episode so perfect for falling asleep to, because it plays with our perception of reality in the same way dreams do. In this episode, every time someone reminisces about a character, that character physically appears in the house as if they've always been there. We see these memory parasites multiply throughout the episode, starting with just Uncle Steve at breakfast and eventually filling the entire house with ridiculous characters like Sleepy Gary, Photography Raptor, and Pencil Vester. The way these characters just pop into existence and everyone immediately accepts them mirrors exactly how dreams work. You know how in dreams you'll suddenly be best friends with a talking giraffe and it seems completely normal? Total Recall captures that exact feeling. The memory parasites keep adding more and more characters who feel completely real to the Smith family despite being total fabrications. What makes this so dreamlike is that both the characters and the audience get these flashback sequences that feel authentic, even though we know they're made up. The episode plays with the idea that memories define our reality, which is pretty much what happens when we dream. Our brains create these elaborate scenarios and relationships that feel completely real in the moment but make no sense when we wake up. Characters like Photography Raptor and Pencil Vester tap into the absurd logic that we accept without question in our dreams. Photography Raptor is literally just a dinosaur who takes pictures, and Pencil Vester is a pencil with a face who apparently was Morty's childhood friend. These characters have no logical reason to exist in this family's life, but the fake memories make them seem normal. It's exactly like how in dreams we might have a conversation with our childhood toy that somehow came to life, and we just go with it. The visual techniques in this episode create this disorienting dreamlike effect too. Whenever a character has a flashback, the screen gets this golden hazy glow, and the transition is super smooth, just sliding from present to past. This mimics how our dreams flow from one scene to another without any jarring cuts. The memories themselves have this warm, nostalgic quality that makes them feel real, even when they're showing completely ridiculous scenarios like the family going on a roller coaster, with reverse giraffe, or having Christmas with Hammer Eye. The color palette of the episode shifts throughout in really subtle ways that add to the dreamlike atmosphere. The house starts with normal lighting but gradually becomes more saturated and warmer as more parasites appear. By the end, when there are dozens of fake characters, the colors are almost too vibrant, creating this slightly unnatural feel that signals to our subconscious that something isn't right. This gradual shift represents how dreams often start somewhat normal, but become increasingly bizarre without us noticing the change until it's extreme. What really makes this episode perfect for falling asleep to is how it constantly questions reality. The characters have to figure out which memories are real and which are fake, which creates this perfect pre-sleep mindset of letting go of logical constraints. There's that amazing scene where Jerry is convinced that Sleepy Gary is his husband, not Beth, because his memories of their relationship feel so real. The idea that our memories might not be reliable is both unsettling and oddly relaxing when you're trying to drift off to sleep. It encourages you to stop trying to make sense of everything and just go with the flow. Eventually, the family discovers that the parasites can only create positive memories, while real memories include negative experiences too. This is another parallel to dreams, where our brain often processes both positive and negative emotions in these bizarre scenarios. Rick figures out that if they remember negative experiences with someone, that person must be real. It leads to this sequence where family members are shooting characters while recalling bad memories about each other, which creates this weird emotional catharsis that's perfect for that final stage before deep sleep. What makes Total Recall create the strangest dreamlike experience in the series is how perfectly it mimics the way our sleeping brains accept impossible scenarios and relationships without question. The episode presents absurdity as reality, just like our dreams do. It shows how easily manipulated our perception is and how our memories shape our understanding of the world. When you're watching this episode while trying to fall asleep, the constant questioning of what's real helps your mind let go of the day's logical thinking and slip into that dream state where a pencil with a face could absolutely be your best friend. The way the episode plays with memory, reality, and identity makes it ideal for that transitional state between wakefulness and sleep. But if you're interested in even deeper levels of reality manipulation, we need to look at how Rick and Morty handles nested realities and consciousness in the Rick Shank Redemption, where nothing is what it seems and reality itself becomes questionable. What if the brain controlling your brain isn't your brain at all? That's the kind of reality-bending question at the heart of the Rick Shank Redemption. This episode starts with Rick being interrogated by the Galactic Federation inside what appears to be a Shoney's restaurant, but we eventually learn it's all happening inside Rick's brain. The Shoney's is actually a mental construct where Rick has control, and from there, the episode takes us through layer after layer of simulated realities that get harder and harder to keep track of. The reason this episode works so well for those trying to fall asleep is that it constantly pulls the rug out from under you, revealing that what you thought was happening isn't real at all. First, we think we're in a real Shoney's, then we realize we're in Rick's mind. Then Rick appears to give up the secret to his portal gun technology, but that's fake too. Then he appears to escape the Federation, but even that isn't what it seems. These layers of deception create a sensation very similar to those strange moments between wakefulness and sleep, where your perception of reality becomes fluid and uncertain. The Shoney's restaurant setting serves as what dream researchers might call an anchor point, a location that keeps reappearing throughout the reality shifts. This restaurant functions the same way certain locations do in recurring dreams, providing a familiar foundation that everything else changes around. Every time the episode returns to the Shoney's, the boundaries between what's real and what's simulated become more blurred. The Galactic Federation agent even tells Rick at one point that he's been shifting between realities so much that they're having trouble parsing what's real, which mirrors exactly how our brains function in that twilight state before deep sleep. What's particularly interesting is how the episode uses familiar settings that subtly change throughout. Rick's garage appears multiple times, but details are different in each iteration. In one version, it's pristine and orderly. In another, it's chaotic and cluttered. This mirrors how locations in dreams often morph. You might be in your childhood home, but the layout is different, or your current workplace suddenly has rooms that don't exist in reality. These subtle inconsistencies signal to our dreaming minds that something isn't quite right, but we accept them anyway. The episode also plays with the concept of fabricated origin stories in a way that parallels how our sleeping minds create false narratives to explain dream events. Rick presents a completely made-up backstory about how he invented his portal technology after his wife and daughter were killed. This fabricated memory is presented so convincingly that both the characters and audience temporarily accept it as true. This is exactly how dreams work. Our brains quickly construct elaborate backstories to explain why we're suddenly flying or why our teeth are falling out. And in the moment, these explanations feel completely logical. Throughout the episode, there's this constant manipulation of memory and perception that creates a disorienting yet oddly soothing effect. The Federation thinks they're the ones navigating Rick's memories, but Rick is actually controlling everything they see. This multi-layered deception creates this strange mental state where you're not sure what to trust, which is perfect for nighttime viewing. When you're trying to fall asleep, this kind of gentle confusion actually helps your brain let go of logical thinking and slip into dream states. Some of the most sleep-inducing moments in the episode come when Rick is working through complex calculations or explaining scientific concepts. There's something about the rhythm of his technical explanations combined with the abstract visuals that creates an almost hypnotic effect. It's detailed enough to occupy your conscious mind, while the subdued animation style during these sequences allows your subconscious to start taking over. The episode also uses color in interesting ways that enhance its dreamlike quality. The Shoney's scenes have this warm, slightly oversaturated look, while the Federation prison has cool blue tones. These distinct color palettes help signal transitions between different reality layers without requiring full attention from viewers. If you're watching with heavy eyelids, these color shifts register subconsciously and help you track the narrative without having to focus too hard. What makes the Rickshank Redemption so disorienting yet perfect for bedtime viewing is that its layered realities mimic the sensation of drifting between consciousness and sleep. That transitional state where thoughts become less logical and more associative is exactly what this episode recreates through its nested realities and false memories. The uncertainty about what's real creates a mental space where you can let go of trying to figure everything out, which is precisely what you need to do to fall asleep. The episode ends with Rick revealing that the entire prison escape was part of his plan all along, collapsing the Galactic Federation and restoring a version of normal reality. This resolution provides just enough closure to prevent your brain from staying active, trying to solve unresolved questions, while the lingering ambiguity about Rick's true motivations gives your mind something pleasantly abstract to ponder as you drift off. From nested realities to one-off characters that haunt our memories, the Rick and Morty universe is filled with strange beings that appear just once but leave lasting impressions in our subconscious. These bizarre visitors feel like the kind of random characters that might show up in our dreams. Have you ever had a dream about someone you've never met but somehow feels strangely familiar? Rick and Morty creates this exact feeling with characters who appear just once but stick in your head long after the episode ends. These bizarre one-time visitors feel like they've been pulled directly from our subconscious, which makes them perfect companions for that transition into sleep. Rick and Morty's universe is filled with these strange characters who show up for a single episode, then disappear forever. What makes them so dreamlike is that they often exist without much explanation. They don't need detailed backstories or complex motivations. They just are. This matches how dream characters function in our sleeping minds. They appear fully formed, often with impossible abilities or features, and we accept them without question. These characters usually defy any kind of logic or explanation, existing purely to showcase how bizarre the multiverse can be. They don't follow the rules of our reality, and they don't need to. They operate on dream logic, where the impossible is just another Tuesday. Their strange appearances and abilities create this unsettling yet fascinating quality that mimics how our brain processes unfamiliar information during sleep. One of the most memorable one-time characters is Fart, the telepathic gas cloud from Morty Night Run. Fart communicates through these incredible psychedelic musical sequences that feel lifted directly from a dream. When Fart sings "Goodbye Moonmen" to Morty, the visuals shift into this flowing, colorful void that perfectly captures what it feels like when your mind starts to drift away from conscious thought. The sequence moves at this slow, hypnotic pace that naturally guides viewers toward a more relaxed state. Then there's King Jellybean, who creates one of the most unsettling dreamlike encounters in the series. Morty meets him in a bathroom in a fantasy world that already operates on fairy tale logic. The jarring shift from whimsical adventure to disturbing threat mimics how dreams can suddenly transform from pleasant to nightmarish without warning. The scene has this surreal quality where something that seems innocent on the surface reveals a darker nature, which is exactly how dream symbols often function, representing deeper anxieties beneath simple appearances. Unity represents another type of dream visitor, the kind that embodies our deepest desires and fears. As a hive mind that takes over entire planets, Unity represents both our dreams of perfect connection and our fears of losing individuality. The episode shows Rick experiencing perfect companionship only to lose it, creating that bittersweet emotional resonance that often lingers in our most powerful dreams. The way Unity can be anyone creates this fluid identity that matches how people in our dreams can shift from one person to another without explanation. The Chromalons, those giant floating heads that demand musical performances in Get Swifty, represent the absurd logic and high stakes of anxiety dreams. They appear without warning, make impossible demands, and threaten planetary destruction if those demands aren't met. This matches those stress dreams where you suddenly have to perform a task you're unprepared for with catastrophic consequences for failure. The ridiculous scale of the threat combined with the arbitrary nature of the solution creates that specific dreamlike quality where nothing makes sense but everything feels important. What's interesting about many of these one-time characters is that they often appear in episodes with slower pacing or extended quiet moments. Fart's episodes have those long travel sequences through space. Unity's episode has contemplative moments after Rick is abandoned. These quieter sections create natural lulls perfect for nighttime viewing, where the intensity drops just enough to let your mind start drifting toward sleep. The sound design around these characters also contributes to their sleep-inducing qualities. Fart's ethereal voice has this echoing quality that creates an audio environment perfect for relaxation. Unity's planet has this constant background hum of synchronized activity that works almost like white noise. Even the Cromulons, despite their loudness, have this consistent bass rumble that creates a steady audio foundation. The visual design of these characters tends toward either hypnotic simplicity or such bizarre complexity that your brain eventually stops trying to process all the details. Fart is basically just swirling colors. Unity is represented by normal-looking people with glowing blue eyes. These visual shortcuts allow your brain to recognize the character without requiring full alertness to track all their features. So which bizarre Rick and Morty characters appear only once but leave lasting impressions in our subconscious? It's the ones that tap into primal emotions through surreal visuals and concepts. Fart connects to our wonder about the universe and consciousness. King Jellybean taps into primal fear and vulnerability. Unity represents our longing for connection and fear of loneliness. The Cromulons embody performance anxiety and arbitrary judgment. These characters work so well for bedtime viewing because they exist in this middle space between comprehensible and bizarre. Just like dreams themselves. They're strange enough to distract your conscious mind from everyday worries, but familiar enough in their emotional core that you don't need to work hard to understand what they represent. They put your brain in exactly the right state for transitioning from waking thought to dream logic. Speaking of surreal visuals, Morty Night Run doesn't just introduce us to Fart. It creates a uniquely soothing yet bizarre viewing experience through its contrast of chaotic action with slow, contemplative moments and those psychedelic musical sequences that seem designed specifically to help viewers drift away from reality. What if I told you the most relaxing place in the universe is an arcade filled with aliens playing games with their actual lives? That's Blips and Chits, the cosmic arcade featured in Morty Night Run, that somehow creates this perfect balance between chaos and calm. This episode takes us through a roller coaster of experiences, but manages to be one of the most oddly soothing entries in the series, especially for nighttime viewing. Morty Night Run introduces us to Blips and Chits, where Rick shows Morty a game called Roy, A Life Well Lived. This game allows players to experience an entire lifetime as another person from birth to death, in what feels like minutes in the real world. We see Rick play through an entire life as Roy, going from childhood to a cancer diagnosis and eventually death. This concept of living an alternative life within a game creates this dream within a dream structure that perfectly mimics how our sleeping minds build elaborate realities that feel completely real until we wake up. The episode constantly shifts between high-energy chase sequences and these strange moments of philosophical calm. 1 minute Morty is frantically trying to save Fart from assassins, and the next they're floating through space having deep conversations about consciousness and morality. These dramatic shifts in pacing create a perfect viewing experience for someone trying to fall asleep. The action sequences are just engaging enough to hold your attention, while the quieter moments allow your mind to start drifting. What's really interesting about this episode is how the color palette changes throughout. The arcade scenes are filled with these bright, neon colors and flashing lights, typical of gaming environments. But when Morty and Fart are traveling through space, everything shifts to these soft blues, purples, and greens. During Fart's musical number, the colors flow and blend in this hypnotic pattern that naturally guides viewers toward a more relaxed state. These color transitions help signal to our brains when it's time to engage and when it's time to relax. The gas cloud character, Fart, is responsible for some of the most sleep-inducing moments in Rick and Morty history. When Fart communicates with Morty through that psychedelic musical sequence, Goodbye Moonmen, the animation creates this flowing cosmic environment that feels like what your mind might conjure right before falling asleep. The slow, dreamy melody combined with the gently morphing visuals creates a trance-like viewing experience. The song itself has this lullaby quality with its simple, repeating phrases and gentle instrumentation. Even though the plot involves assassins, prison breaks, and moral dilemmas, the episode's soundtrack creates this unexpectedly calming atmosphere. Beyond Fart's musical number, there's this ambient background music during the space travel scenes that's minimal and soothing. The sound design during these sequences minimizes harsh noises in favor of these gentle, whooshing sounds that mimic white noise machines people use for sleep. Even during the arcade scenes, the background noises blend into this consistent hum that becomes almost meditative after a while. Throughout the episode, there's this recurring theme of identity confusion that mirrors how we sometimes become different people in our dreams. Morty questions who he is and what he stands for when faced with difficult moral choices. Rick literally becomes Roy in the video game, completely forgetting his real identity while immersed in the simulation. Fart misunderstands the nature of carbon-based life forms, seeing them as a disease rather than conscious beings. This exploration of fluid identity creates this philosophical backdrop that's perfect for pre-sleep contemplation. Deep enough to be interesting, but not so complex that it keeps you wide awake. The Roy game sequence deserves special attention for its sleep-inducing qualities. The way it compresses an entire lifetime into a few minutes creates this strange time dilation effect similar to dreams where years can pass in what feels like seconds. The game shows Roy's life through these quick vignettes with soft transitions between them, creating a montage effect that doesn't require your full attention to follow. You can drift in and out of focus and still understand the overall narrative, which is ideal for those moments when you're on the edge of sleep. One of the most interesting aspects of Morty Night Run is how it handles moral ambiguity in this dreamy, detached way. Morty learns that Fart plans to eliminate all carbon-based life, which forces him to make a difficult decision. This exploration of complex ethical questions happens in this gentle, almost philosophical manner, rather than through intense emotional confrontations. The episode raises these big questions about existence and morality, but presents them in this floating cosmic context that creates emotional distance, making it easier for viewers to engage without becoming too stimulated for sleep. So how does Morty Night Run blend weirdness with oddly soothing visuals? Through its perfect contrast of fast-paced action with slow, contemplative moments and those psychedelic musical sequences, the episode constantly shifts gears between excitement and calm, creating a rhythm that naturally leads viewers toward relaxation. The cosmic setting allows for these beautiful space backgrounds that work as visual white noise. The philosophical questions create just enough mental engagement without demanding full alertness. From the soothing chaos of Morty Night Run, we discover that Rick and Morty contains many moments specifically designed to calm our brains, despite the show's reputation for high-energy comedy. But beyond these obvious peaceful scenes, the series also contains unexpected ASMR moments hidden throughout its strangest episodes. Did you know there are moments in Rick and Morty specifically designed to trigger those pleasant tingles in your brain? They're not marketed as ASMR content, but fans have discovered these hidden moments that work surprisingly well for relaxation. Rick and Morty has earned its reputation for fast-paced dialogue and chaotic energy, but scattered throughout are these unexpected islands of auditory calm that work perfectly for nighttime viewing. These ASMR-like moments are often hidden within the most bizarre episodes, creating an interesting contrast that makes them even more effective. You'll be watching an intense adventure with rapid-fire jokes, and suddenly the show transitions into this slow, methodical sequence with specific sounds that trigger that relaxing, tingling sensation. The contrast between the high-energy content and these quiet moments creates a stronger relaxation response than if the entire show maintained the same calm tone throughout. Rick's scientific explanations are a goldmine for accidental ASMR. There are multiple scenes where Rick slows down his usually frantic speech pattern to explain complex scientific concepts. In Rick Potion number 9, there's this sequence where Rick carefully explains the genetic properties of his love potion while mixing chemicals. His voice takes on this methodical, almost hypnotic rhythm as he works. The combination of his measured speech pattern, the soft clinking of glass containers, and the gentle bubbling of liquids creates this perfect storm of ASMR triggers. The sound design team for Rick and Morty deserves credit for creating these unintentional ASMR moments. The alien languages throughout the show often feature unusual tones and cadences that trigger that pleasant tingling sensation. The Cromulons from Get Swifty speak with this deep, resonant voice that vibrates at specific frequencies known to create calming effects. The Federation aliens use these clicking sounds in their speech that create interesting audio textures. Even the simple portal gun sounds have this specific frequency that many viewers find oddly satisfying. One of the best examples of Rick and Morty ASMR comes from The Ricks Must Be Crazy, when Rick explains the microverse battery. This scene combines several perfect ASMR elements. Rick's voice slows down as he methodically explains the concept. The animation shows detailed mechanical processes with corresponding gentle sounds, and the background contains this subtle electrical humming that creates a consistent audio foundation. The way the camera slowly pans through the different levels of the battery creates this visual rhythm that enhances the auditory experience. In many episodes, we see Rick working alone in his garage, and these scenes often feature extended sequences of him tinkering with inventions. In Pickle Rick, before the transformation, there's this 30-second sequence of Rick simply adjusting screws and connecting wires with minimum dialogue. All you hear are these precise mechanical sounds: the click of metal components, the soft whir of small motors, the gentle tapping of tools on various surfaces. These sounds create what ASMR enthusiasts call trigger cascades, sequences of different satisfying sounds that build on each other. What's particularly interesting is how the show occasionally uses extended periods of relative quiet or ambient noise that work perfectly for sleep induction. In The Wedding Squanchers, there's a scene where the family is hiding on a tiny planet, and all you hear is this gentle alien wind sound for almost a full minute. In The Ricklantis Mix-Up, the underwater sequences at the Citadel feature this muffled, bubbling soundscape that creates a womb-like audio environment. These moments of ambient noise provide perfect audio backgrounds for falling asleep. The creators seem aware of the power of contrast in audio design because these quiet moments are often strategically placed after particularly high-energy scenes. In Total Rickle, after a chaotic alien parasite battle, there's this 30-second scene of the family sitting silently in the living room with just the sound of breathing and subtle house noises. This positioning creates a physiological relaxation response as viewers unconsciously mirror the on-screen shift from chaos to calm. Your brain and body naturally follow the energy transition presented in the show. The animation style during these quieter moments often shifts as well, moving to slower movement, more static shots, and reduced visual complexity. In Morty's Mind Blowers, the memory vial storage room scenes feature this minimal movement and consistent blue lighting that pairs perfectly with the soft humming sounds of the equipment. The combination of visual simplicity and gentle audio creates the ideal conditions for that drowsy pre-sleep state. What unexpected ASMR-like moments exist throughout the series' strangest episodes? They're found in Rick's methodical work sequences and the unique sound design of alien environments. The garage workshop scenes consistently deliver satisfying mechanical sounds and measured explanations. The space travel sequences often feature these gentle background hums and atmospheric sounds. Even the simple act of Rick filling his flask creates this specific pouring sound and glass clink that triggers relaxation responses. These moments aren't flashy or memorable in terms of plot development, which is probably why they're often overlooked in discussions about the show. But their subtle presence creates these pockets of calm that make Rick and Morty surprisingly suitable for bedtime viewing, despite its typically high-energy content. The contrast between the show's usual chaos and these islands of auditory calm makes the ASMR effect even more pronounced than it would be in consistently quiet content. From these soothing sounds that help ease you towards sleep, let's move to one of the most disturbing yet hypnotic episodes in the series. Rick Potion number 9 creates a uniquely unsettling experience through its combination of body horror and matter-of-fact acceptance of cosmic catastrophe. What if you could fall asleep to the sound of an entire world being replaced, including yourself? Rick Potion number 9 ends with what might be the most psychologically disturbing sequence in the entire series, yet people often mention it as oddly mesmerizing. This is the episode where Rick creates a love potion for Morty to use on his crush Jessica, but it goes horribly wrong, eventually transforming everyone on Earth except the Smith family into these blob monsters called Cronenbergs. The way this episode resolves is what makes it so uniquely suited for that strange mental space right before sleep. After destroying their entire world through a series of escalating scientific mistakes, Rick doesn't come up with some clever solution to fix everything. He just finds another reality where alternate versions of himself and Morty died, right after solving the same crisis. They simply step in to replace their dead counterparts and continue living in this new reality as if nothing happened. What follows is this 3-minute sequence that feels completely different from anything else in the show. Rick and Morty walk into the garage of their new home and find their own dead bodies on the floor. Without much discussion, they drag the corpses to the backyard and bury them. The methodical way they dig the grave, position the bodies, and cover them with dirt creates this unsettling rhythm that somehow becomes hypnotic. The repetitive movements and the sound of shovels in dirt create this almost meditative quality despite the horrific context. The music during this sequence does something really interesting too. It's this gentle, almost ambient piece that creates emotional distance from what's happening, instead of dramatic horror music that would emphasize the disturbing nature of burying your own body. This softer soundtrack creates this dreamlike quality that makes everything feel slightly unreal. The music basically gives you permission to process what's happening without fully engaging with how horrifying it actually is. This concept of casually replacing your reality taps into these deep existential questions that are perfect for late-night contemplation. What makes us who we are? If we step into an identical reality, are we still the same person? How much does our specific history matter to our identity? These are the kind of philosophical questions that create just enough mental engagement to distract you from your own thoughts without being so stimulating that they keep you awake. What makes this final sequence even more impactful is how it contrasts with everything that came before it. The earlier parts of the episode are completely chaotic. Love potions gone wrong, mutations spreading across the world, Rick and Morty frantically trying solutions that only make things worse. Then suddenly, all that frenetic energy stops. The final sequence is quiet, methodical, and resigned. This dramatic shift in pacing creates this natural wind-down effect that mimics how our bodies prepare for sleep. Throughout the episode, we see this visual motif of transformation. First, Jessica changes, then the school, then the whole world, then Rick and Morty's place in reality itself. This progression creates this surreal, dreamlike quality where everything keeps shifting into something else. By the end, even the tone of the show has transformed from comedic sci-fi adventure to existential horror. This constant state of flux mirrors how dreams often work, with settings and situations morphing gradually from one state to another. After burying their bodies, we see Morty sitting at the breakfast table the next day, clearly traumatized by what happened. The audio drops out except for the sound of his spoon clinking against his cereal bowl, creating this moment of sensory focus that works similarly to ASMR. His 1,000-yard stare as Summer complains about ordinary teenage problems emphasizes the psychological weight of casually stepping into another reality. The contrast between his existential crisis and the mundane breakfast scene creates this cognitive dissonance that's strangely soothing in its absurdity. Rick Potion number 9 is considered psychologically disturbing yet hypnotic because its matter-of-fact approach to cosmic horror creates this trance-like acceptance of the impossible. Instead of dramatic music and emotional breakdowns, we get quiet resignation and practical solutions to metaphysical problems. The episode doesn't tell us how to feel about these massive existential issues. It just presents them straightforwardly and lets the viewer process them. This emotional space creates the perfect conditions for that transitional state between wakefulness and sleep. where we're still thinking, but the thoughts are becoming more abstract and disconnected. The episode ends with Summer searching for college scholarships while Morty stares off into space, creating this quiet final moment that perfectly leads viewers towards sleep. There's no big climax or dramatic conclusion, just the soft sounds of a normal household continuing on, despite the complete replacement of their reality. It's cosmic horror, presented through the lens of mundane suburban life, creating this unique dissonance that somehow works perfectly for drifting off to sleep. From one disturbing reality, where Rick and Morty replace themselves after destroying their world, let's explore how the show handles multiple realities simultaneously in close Rick counters of the Rick kind, where the multiverse itself becomes a character. Imagine a room filled with infinite versions of yourself, each slightly different, and most of them want you dead. That's exactly what Rick faces in close Rick counters of the Rick kind, an episode that takes everything we thought we knew about reality and multiplies it by infinity. This is the episode where we're first introduced to the Council of Ricks, a governing body made up of Ricks from different dimensions who have joined together for mutual protection and to share resources. The episode starts with our Rick being accused of murdering other Ricks across the multiverse. He's arrested by Rick cops and taken to the Citadel of Ricks, this massive space station where thousands of Ricks and Mortys from across dimensions live together. What makes this so perfect for nighttime viewing is how the episode just keeps introducing increasingly bizarre variations of familiar characters without ever explaining them. We see Ricks with hammerhead shark features, Ricks made of couches, Ricks from dimensions where they evolved from lizards. Our brains just have to accept these impossible variations without question, which is exactly what happens in dreams. The visual design of these alternate dimensions creates this fascinating tour through impossible realities. Each new location has its own distinct color scheme and physics. There's a dimension where everything is slightly sideways, one where everything has a reddish tint, another where the shapes seem wrong somehow. These quick glimpses of alternate realities flash by so quickly that our brains don't have time to fully process them, creating this dream, like flow, where we're just along for the ride through these impossible spaces. What makes the Citadel of Rick so interesting is that it serves as this physical manifestation of dream logic, where contradictory elements exist simultaneously. You have these Ricks who pride themselves on being independent free thinkers, yet they've formed this rigid bureaucratic government. You have infinite variations of the same person somehow all existing in one place. The architecture itself reflects this contradiction, with this grand, almost religious central chamber surrounded by dingy back alleys and marketplaces. It's like a dream where your childhood home somehow connects to your office building. Things that shouldn't coexist somehow do. During the episode, Rick talks about being the Rickest Rick, and Morty being the Mortiest Morty, creating this existential framework that's perfect for that drowsy contemplative state before sleep. The idea that there's an essential Rickness that can be measured across infinite variations raises all these questions about identity. What makes you you if there are infinite versions of you? Which version is most authentic? These are exactly the kind of abstract philosophical questions that are perfect for that pre-sleep state, where your mind is starting to detach from logical constraints. One of the most effective techniques this episode uses is these rapid transitions between different realities. We jump from the Smith household to the Citadel, to a weird lab to another dimension, all within minutes. The scene transitions create this flow of consciousness that mimics how our dreams work, where we suddenly find ourselves in new locations without questioning how we got there. This dreamlike flow lets viewers drift in and out of full attention without losing track of the overall experience, making it perfect for nighttime viewing. Eventually, we get the revelation of Evil Morty, though we don't know that's who he is yet. He's just presented as this Morty who somehow controlled a Rick and was responsible for killing Ricks across the multiverse. This creates this slow-building sense of unease throughout the episode that, strangely enough, works really well for relaxation. The mild anxiety response actually prevents your mind from wandering to your own real-life stressors, creating this perfect distraction that keeps your thoughts contained within the show's universe rather than drifting to tomorrow's problems. The most surreal dimension in close Rick counters has to be the one containing that dome of Mortys being tortured to mask Evil Morty's brainwaves. It combines body horror with these metaphysical concepts in a way that's disturbing yet oddly mesmerizing. We see dozens of Mortys hooked up to these machines that extract their pain to create a kind of psychic camouflage. The concept itself is bizarre enough, but the visual design of these pale, suffering Mortys, arranged in this perfect dome pattern, creates this strange geometric horror that feels like something from a fever dream. What makes this episode so effective for bedtime viewing is that it presents these mind-bending concepts through familiar characters. The relationships between the various Ricks and Mortys provide this emotional anchor that keeps the surreal elements from becoming too abstract. We understand Rick and Morty, so seeing infinite variations of them gives us a framework to process the impossible. It's similar to how dreams often feature familiar people in unfamiliar situations. That mixture of known and unknown elements is what makes dreams so distinctive. The episode ends with Rick showing genuine affection for Morty before immediately reverting to his usual self, creating this emotional beat that provides just enough resolution to satisfy without demanding further thought. It's the perfect episode ending for drifting off to sleep. A small emotional payoff followed by a return to status quo that doesn't leave you with cliffhanger anxiety, keeping your brain active. From the multiverse with its infinite variations, let's move to a different kind of infinity. A single consciousness spread across thousands of bodies. Autoerotic assimilation introduces Unity, a hive mind entity that creates one of the most uniquely dreamy atmospheres in the entire series. What if falling asleep meant joining a collective consciousness where you're never alone again? That's basically what Unity offers in Autoerotic Assimilation, an episode that introduces this hive mind entity that can take over entire populations. Unity is an old flame of Rick's who he reconnects with when they visit a planet she's currently controlling. This episode creates one of the most unique atmospheric experiences in the series and happens to work really well for nighttime viewing. Unity is interesting because she's basically one person spread across thousands of bodies. She can control entire civilizations and make them do whatever she wants. When Rick and Morty first arrive on her planet, we see all these aliens with this slight blue tint to their eyes moving in perfect unison. They all speak with the same voice and can hold multiple conversations simultaneously through different bodies. This visual representation of a single mind, controlling thousands of bodies, creates these really strange scenes where we see entire crowds moving like they're part of one organism. The episode creates this strange dreamlike atmosphere by showing how Unity can make an entire population act in perfect synchronization. There's this scene where Rick requests an entire stadium of people to form a giant portrait of him, and within seconds, thousands of individuals organize themselves into this perfect image. It's visually similar to those moments right before sleep, where your thoughts become more fluid and boundaries start to dissolve. The way Unity can instantly redirect hundreds of people without any confusion mirrors that feeling of thoughts flowing together as consciousness fades. What's really interesting is how the episode's color palette shifts as Unity's influence expands and contracts throughout the story. When Unity has strong control over the population, everything has this consistent blue-purple tone with very orderly composition in the shots. When her control starts to slip because she's partying too hard with Rick, the colors become more varied and chaotic. This visual shift creates this subtle mood change that registers even if you're watching with heavy eyelids. The blues and purples also happen to be colors that are easier on the eyes in darkened rooms, making the episode visually comfortable for nighttime viewing. The concept of losing individual identity within Unity's collective consciousness mirrors what happens to our own consciousness as we fall asleep. When we're fully awake, we have this strong sense of individual identity and separation from everything around us. But as we drift towards sleep, those boundaries start to blur. Our thoughts become less directed and more associative, and our sense of self begins to dissolve. Unity represents this same process, but externalized across an entire population. Watching thousands of individuals function as a single entity creates this visual metaphor for the dissolution of consciousness that happens right before sleep. One of the most sleep-inducing aspects of this episode is how the pacing slows down during Unity's planet-wide party scenes. After Rick convinces Unity to loosen up a bit, we get these extended sequences of planet-wide celebrations. These scenes have this dreamy quality with slow panning shots across groups of aliens dancing, drinking, and generally enjoying themselves in perfect harmony. The camera movements become more languid, and the editing slows down significantly compared to the show's usual rapid-fire style. This creates a trance-like viewing experience where you can just let the images wash over you without needing to track quick cuts or dialogue. The episode also presents this interesting philosophical contrast between chaotic individuality and harmonious collectivity. Rick represents this chaotic individual force who does whatever he wants without concern for consequences. Unity represents perfect order and cooperation, but at the cost of individual freedom. This contrast creates an interesting backdrop for contemplation as you're trying to fall asleep. It's the kind of abstract philosophical question that's engaging enough to distract you from your own thoughts, but not so demanding that it keeps you fully alert. Throughout the episode, there are these strangely peaceful moments where we just see Unity's civilization functioning perfectly. Trash gets collected, buildings get constructed, conflicts get resolved, all without any disagreement or inefficiency. There's something oddly satisfying about watching a society function with perfect coordination. It creates this sense of everything being taken care of, which can help quiet the part of your brain that worries about loose ends and unfinished business before sleep. The final part of the episode shows what happens when Unity abandons the planet, leaving all the individuals to return to their original personalities. We see them immediately returning to their previous conflicts and prejudices. This sequence creates a strange emotional effect where we find ourselves missing the peace of the collective despite knowing it came at the cost of individual freedom. It's a complex emotional note that gives your mind something interesting to process as you drift off. So how does autoerotic assimilation create a uniquely dreamy atmosphere? Through its visual representation of thousands of individuals moving with perfect synchronicity under one consciousness. The blue-tinted eyes of Unity's people, the coordinated movements of entire crowds, the peaceful efficiency of a unified civilization, all these elements combine to create this hypnotic viewing experience that's perfect for winding down. The episode's deeper questions about identity and consciousness provide just enough mental engagement without demanding full alertness. From collective consciousness where thousands share one mind, let's move to an episode about individual timelines and the perfect structure for late-night viewing. The Vat of Acid episode creates a uniquely disconnected viewing experience where continuity becomes as fluid as our pre-sleep thoughts. What if you could press a button and redo any mistake you make, but there's a secret cost you don't discover until it's too late? The Vat of Acid episode explores this concept through a device Rick creates after Morty criticizes his fake acid vat plan. The episode begins with Rick and Morty trying to pull off a deal with some aliens, and Rick's emergency escape plan involves faking their deaths by jumping into a vat of acid. When the plan fails and Morty criticizes it, Rick gets offended and creates this save point device just to prove Morty wrong. The device seems to let Morty save his place in time and return to it whenever he wants, just like in a video game. Morty can do whatever he wants, and if things go badly, he just presses the button and returns to his save point. The episode's middle section plays out as this series of disconnected scenes where Morty tests the limits of what he can do without consequences. He dumps water on people, throws things at strangers, steals stuff, and when things go wrong, he just resets. This structure creates a dreamlike sequence where normal continuity doesn't matter anymore. Actions don't have permanent effects, and time becomes this fluid thing that can be manipulated at will. The visual transitions between these resets are really interesting for late-night viewing. Every time Morty presses the button, everything on screen freezes, then rapidly rewinds back to the save point. This visual effect creates something similar to the sensation we experience when drifting between sleep states. That feeling where time seems to jump backward or forward without warning. The quick flash and whoosh sound that accompanies each reset works almost like a hypnotic trigger after you see it happen multiple times. Your brain starts to anticipate the pattern, which creates a rhythm that's oddly soothing. As Morty gets more comfortable with the device, we see a montage of him using it for increasingly trivial things. He uses it to retry a basketball shot until he makes it. He uses it to say the perfect thing in conversations. He uses it to avoid minor embarrassments. This montage has this hypnotic quality because it follows this consistent pattern of attempt, failure, reset, new attempt. The repetition creates almost a meditative rhythm that's perfect for late-night viewing. You don't need to follow every detail because the pattern itself becomes familiar enough to follow with minimal attention. In the middle of all these resets, Morty actually experiences a real relationship with a girl he meets on a plane. We see them fall in love, move in together, and build a life, all without Morty ever using the reset button. This extended sequence creates this nice emotional core in the middle of all the disconnected reset vignettes. It gives viewers just enough emotional investment to stay engaged without requiring full alertness to follow the plot. The relationship scenes have longer takes and more gentle pacing than the reset montage, creating natural lulls that are perfect for drifting off. Then comes the episode's shocking revelation. Rick reveals that the device never actually let Morty go back in time. Instead, every time Morty pressed the button, Rick just transported him to a different reality where he hadn't done the embarrassing thing yet, and merged all the alternate Mortys from those realities into one timeline, killing them in the process. This twist creates this perfect pre-sleep existential crisis. It's complex enough to make you think, but presented simply enough that you don't need to be fully alert to understand it. The concept of all these parallel Mortys being collapsed into one timeline mirrors how our brains consolidate memories during sleep, taking disparate experiences and combining them into coherent narratives. The episode uses color in interesting ways that enhance its dreamlike quality too. The normal world has this consistent color palette, but when Morty is with his girlfriend, everything gets this slightly warmer tone. Then, when the truth is revealed and we see all the dead Mortys, the color shifts to these colder blues and greens. These subtle shifts help signal emotional changes without requiring viewers to follow dialogue closely, making it easier to follow along even as you're drifting off. What makes the Vat of Acid episode perfect for late-night viewing is its disconnected vignette structure that creates a dreamlike flow that doesn't require linear attention. You can drift in and out of full consciousness while watching, and the episode's structure accommodates that naturally. The repetitive pattern of save, reset creates a predictable rhythm that's soothing rather than jarring. The gradual revelation of what's actually happening provides just enough narrative tension to keep you engaged without being stimulating enough to keep you wide awake. The episode even ends with Morty having to jump in the acid vat for real to escape some angry residents whose dogs he killed in one of his reset sprees. This callback creates this perfect narrative loop that gives just enough closure to prevent your brain from staying active, trying to resolve loose ends. The circular structure mirrors how dreams often incorporate elements from our day but rearrange them into new patterns. From time manipulation in the Vat of Acid episode, we move to memory manipulation in Morty's Mind Blowers, where Rick has been storing Morty's traumatic memories in color-coded vials for later viewing. These disconnected memory fragments create another perfect example of dreamlike storytelling. What if your most traumatic memories weren't actually gone but stored in color-coded vials in your grandfather's secret room? Morty's Mind Blowers reveals that Rick has been removing Morty's traumatic memories for quite some time. This isn't just a one-off thing Rick does occasionally. He has an entire hidden room dedicated to storing these memories in little vials that Morty can rewatch like videos. The episode actually replaces Interdimensional Cable as the anthology episode of Season 3, giving us a collection of memories instead of TV clips. The entire episode consists of these disconnected memory vignettes that don't follow any kind of normal story structure. We see Morty watching memories of things like meeting an alien named Truth Tortoise that makes you know everything if you look in its eyes, or accidentally getting a squirrel conspiracy mad at him, or learning that Rick moved their entire family to a new reality after Morty accidentally killed a guy with a telescope. None of these memories connect to each other in any traditional narrative way. They flow from one to another without transitions or explanations, just like how our dreams jump between scenarios without explaining how we got from one place to another. Rick organizes these memory vials using a color coding system that brings a tiny bit of order to the chaos. Blue vials contain memories where Rick made mistakes and looks bad. Red vials are memories Morty specifically asked to have removed. Purple vials contain what Rick calls the big mysteries, things neither of them understand or can explain. This visual organization system creates these blocks of color throughout the room that make the chaotic collection of memories feel like it has some kind of structure, even though the actual content inside them follows no logical pattern at all. If you look really closely at some of these memories, you can spot subtle details in the background that connect to other episodes in ways most viewers completely miss. There's alien writing visible in several memories that appears to be the same language, suggesting connections between seemingly unrelated events. In one memory, we can briefly see a photo on the wall that seems to show Rick with another family, hinting at parts of his past we haven't explored. During the squirrel conspiracy memory, there's a newspaper with headlines referencing events from previous episodes. These tiny details create this sense that everything connects in ways that aren't immediately obvious, similar to how our sleeping brains sometimes incorporate random elements from our day into seemingly unrelated dream scenarios. The concept of reviewing forgotten memories parallels exactly how our brains process and organize information during sleep. Scientists think one of the main functions of sleep is memory consolidation. Our brains take the day's experiences, sort through them, strengthen important connections, and discard unnecessary details. In Morty's Mind Blowers, we literally watch Morty and Rick go through the same process manually, reviewing memories and deciding which ones to keep and which to discard. The entire episode visualizes this internal sleep process as an external activity we can watch. The frame story adds another layer of complexity when Rick and Morty accidentally erase their own memories of who they are. This creates this situation where neither character remembers anything, including why they're in this room surrounded by memory vials. This memory loss creates layers of unreliable narration where we can't trust what Rick and Morty think about the memories they're watching because they've lost the context. This mirrors how dream logic works. In dreams, we often find ourselves in situations without knowing how we got there, and we just accept whatever reality we find ourselves in. The visual design of the memory vials and the extraction process creates this soothing, almost ritualistic viewing experience. The memory extraction device makes this soft humming sound as it pulls glowing fluid from Morty's head. The vials glow with gentle blue, red, or purple light depending on their category. When they watch memories, the light from the projection bathes the room in a soft glow. The entire setup creates this calm, meditative environment that's perfect for nighttime viewing. The soft lighting and gentle mechanical sounds create an almost ASMR-like experience. One of the subtle background details most viewers miss is the alien writing that appears in multiple memories but never gets translated. This writing appears on walls, in books, and on technology across different memories, suggesting these apparently disconnected experiences might actually be part of some larger story we aren't seeing. The writing looks consistent across memories, using the same alphabet and structure, which implies it's a real language with meaning rather than just random symbols. This creates a subtle mystery that works on your subconscious, even if you don't consciously notice it. The episode ends with Summer coming in, explaining this has happened before, and restoring their memories using a backup system Rick created. She mentions they usually do interdimensional cable when this happens, bringing the episode full circle and connecting it to the anthology episodes from previous seasons. This ending provides just enough resolution to feel satisfying, without answering any of the deeper questions raised by the existence of the memory room itself. From these individual disconnected memories, we move to an entire society made up of alternate versions of our two main characters in the Ricklantis mix-up, an episode that creates a strangely calming experience, despite its complex narrative structure. What if the most soothing bedtime story was actually about societal collapse, corruption, and secret evil plots? The Ricklantis mix-up, also called Tales from the Citadel, takes us away from the main Rick and Morty we usually follow, and instead shows us this entire society made up of different versions of Rick and Morty living together in the Citadel. While our regular Rick has always called this place a Ricktatorship, the episode shows us it's way more complex than that, with different social classes, political systems, and everyday problems. The Ricklantis mix-up follows multiple storylines happening at the same time. We see four Mortys going on a school trip to the Wishing Portal, a rookie cop Rick paired with a jaded veteran Morty, a factory worker Rick trying to move up in the world, and a Rick running for president of the Citadel. None of these stories directly connect with each other, but they all show different aspects of this society made entirely of Ricks and Mortys. This structure seems like it would be confusing, but the episode presents everything at this measured pace that makes it easy to follow. Despite juggling all these different plots, the episode creates this oddly calming viewing experience. Each storyline moves forward in small, clear steps, and the editing gives us just enough time with each group before moving to the next one. This methodical pacing means we never stay with one story long enough to get too invested in intense emotions or complicated plot points. The steady rhythm of moving between storylines creates almost a lulling effect, like waves at the beach going in and out in a regular pattern. It's complex content, presented in a way that doesn't demand your full attention. The anthology format works perfectly for nighttime viewing, because you can drift in and out of attention without losing the overall experience. If you miss some details from the factory worker Rick storyline, you can still follow what's happening with the Morty school trip when the episode returns to them. Each storyline is simple enough to follow on its own, and they all contribute to this overall picture of the Citadel without requiring you to connect complicated plot points. This forgiving structure is perfect for those moments when you're starting to get drowsy but aren't ready to turn off the TV yet. Visually, the episode uses a lot of film noir elements that create this subdued color palette that's easy on the eyes in a dark room. The Citadel has these muted blues and grays with occasional splashes of neon signs in the background. The lighting often creates these soft shadows that reduce visual harshness. Compared to the bright, vibrant worlds we usually see Rick and Morty visit, the Citadel has this consistent, understated look that doesn't strain your eyes when you're watching at night with the lights off. One thing that makes this episode surprisingly good for falling asleep to is the background ambient sounds of the Citadel. Throughout the episode, we hear this constant, gentle hum of city life. Distant conversations, the sounds of flying vehicles, machinery operating in the background. These create this unexpected urban ASMR experience that forms a consistent audio backdrop that's interesting enough to hold your attention, but not distracting enough to keep you fully alert. The sound designers created this fully realized audio environment that feels lived in and steady. The way the episode constantly shifts between different perspectives mirrors exactly how our focus drifts as we start falling asleep. 1 minute we're with the campaign team for the Rick running for president, then we're with the Morty cop dealing with corruption, then we're with the factory worker Rick trying to improve his life. These perspective shifts happen without jarring transitions, creating a flow that matches how our thoughts naturally move from one subject to another as we get sleepy. It's like the episode is designed to sync up with your gradually loosening grip on focused attention. Throughout all these seemingly separate stories, there's this slow-burning revelation of evil Morty's plan to take over the Citadel. The episode drops subtle hints about what's happening without making it too obvious, or requiring you to pick up on every detail. By the end, when the newly elected president is revealed to be evil Morty, it feels like a natural conclusion rather than a shocking twist that would jolt you back to full alertness. This creates the perfect balance of narrative satisfaction without the kind of surprise that might wake you up if you were already drifting off. How does the Ricklantis mix-up create an oddly calming multiverse experience? Through its anthology structure that doesn't punish viewers for drifting in and out of attention. The episode presents complex ideas about society, class, and corruption, but does it in this gentle, methodical way that allows your brain to engage as much or as little as it wants. You can follow all the subtleties of the political campaign storyline, or just enjoy the visuals of the Citadel without worrying about missing crucial information. The steady pacing, consistent visual tone, and ambient soundscape all work together to create this strangely relaxing experience despite the show's complex subject matter. From this complex society filled with infinite versions of two characters, we now move to just one character in perhaps his simplest form. Pickle Rick might seem like the least likely candidate for a relaxing viewing experience. But there's something about watching a pickle systematically solve problems that creates its own kind of bizarre relaxation. How can watching a pickle slaughter rats and fight through a secret facility possibly help you fall asleep? Pickle Rick seems like the worst choice for bedtime viewing with all its violence and intensity. The episode starts with Rick turning himself into a pickle just to avoid family therapy, and then follows him through increasingly brutal fights against rats and Russian agents. On paper, this sounds like something that would keep you wide awake, but there's something oddly calming about the whole experience that makes it work surprisingly well for nighttime viewing. Pickle Rick works because the episode fully commits to its absurd premise. From the moment Rick reveals he's turned himself into a pickle, the episode never questions whether this makes sense or not. It just accepts the reality and moves forward. This consistency creates a strange sense of comfort. We know exactly what we're dealing with here. It's a pickle that's going to find a way to survive. The clearly defined problem and boundaries actually make it easier for our brains to process than more complex emotional scenarios. When Rick falls into the sewer and has to figure out how to survive without limbs, we get these methodical sequences of him using his mouth to flip over dead cockroaches and extract their neural systems. The way he constructs tools and weapons from his environment follows this clear step-by-step progression that becomes oddly satisfying to watch. First, he gets movement, then better movement, then weapons, then more advanced weapons. This logical progression creates a soothing pattern that our brains can follow without much effort, making it easier to relax while watching. What balances the episode perfectly are the therapy scenes that happen with the rest of the family. While Rick is off having his violent pickle adventure, Beth, Summer, and Morty are in this calm, sterile therapy office talking about their feelings. These scenes provide these quiet, philosophical counterpoints to the action. Dr. Wong speaks in this measured, soft voice as she analyzes the family's dynamics, creating these moments of calm reflection between the more intense action sequences. The pacing between these two settings creates a natural rhythm of excitement and relaxation that mimics how our brains need to cycle through different states before sleep. The voice performance during Pickle Rick's monologues actually has this rhythmic quality that works surprisingly well for sleep. When Rick explains how he's going to construct a laser using the parts he's gathered, or when he's figuring out how to defeat the next enemy, his voice finds this steady cadence that becomes almost hypnotic. The technical jargon creates this white noise effect where the specific words matter less than the steady flow of sound. You can let the explanations wash over you without needing to understand every detail. The episode's core theme about avoiding emotional discomfort resonates with our nighttime thought patterns in an interesting way. Rick turned himself into a pickle specifically to avoid therapy. He'd rather face physical danger than emotional vulnerability. This mirrors how many of us approach bedtime, when quiet moments often bring uncomfortable thoughts to the surface. We sometimes avoid addressing emotional issues during the day, only to have them appear as we try to fall asleep. Watching Rick literally battle his way through problems rather than talk about them creates this strange parallel to how we sometimes handle our own avoidance. Visually, the episode creates this interesting contrast between the sterile, evenly lit therapy office and the gritty, shadowy facility where Pickle Rick fights. This creates different textures for drowsy viewing. Sometimes you get these calm, conversation-focused scenes with minimal movement, and other times you get more dynamic action with stronger visual contrast. This variety actually works well for nighttime viewing because it prevents visual fatigue that can come from scenes that are too visually consistent or too chaotic. Dr. Wong's final speech to the family about people using science to avoid engagement with ordinary life creates one of the most calming philosophical moments in the series. Her voice maintains this gentle, non-judgmental tone even while delivering some pretty harsh truths. The content gives your brain something meaningful to process, while the delivery avoids triggering alertness or defensive reactions. It's complex enough to be interesting, but presented simply enough that you don't need to be fully awake to absorb it. What makes Pickle Rick both bizarre and strangely relaxing despite all its violence is the way it balances methodical problem-solving sequences with philosophical therapy conversations. The episode gives us both mindless action and mindful reflection, creating this complete mental experience that satisfies different parts of our brain. The absurd premise creates enough distance from reality that the violence doesn't register as threatening or stressful. Instead, we get to watch a systematic progression of solutions to clearly defined problems, which creates a surprisingly soothing viewing experience wrapped in the package of an action episode. From pickle problems to peaceful toilets, the show takes us to one of its most unexpectedly tranquil episodes. The Old Man in the Seat reveals Rick's secret private bathroom on an idyllic alien world. creating what might be the most genuinely peaceful moments in the entire series. What if the most peaceful moment in Rick and Morty is Rick sitting alone on a toilet on an alien planet? The old man in the seat reveals that Rick has a secret bathroom that he's created on this beautiful alien world where he goes just to have some privacy. This isn't some gross bathroom or some weird interdimensional toilet technology. It's actually this beautiful natural setting with a simple toilet placed on a cliff overlooking this incredible vista. Rick has this whole routine where he sneaks away from the family, travels through a portal, and then spends time completely alone in this serene environment. The episode centers around Rick discovering that someone has used his private toilet, sending him on this obsessive mission to find out who violated his sanctuary. But what makes this episode so perfect for nighttime viewing is that it shows some of the most visually calming settings in the entire series. Every time we return to Rick's toilet planet, we see these gorgeous landscapes with flowing water, gentle waterfalls, and lush alien vegetation. The toilet itself sits on this cliff edge with a perfect view of the valley below and mountains in the distance. The visual design team created this environment specifically to feel peaceful and isolated. The color palette they use for these scenes works perfectly for inducing sleep. The alien planet has this consistent theme of blues and purples, with occasional accents of pink in the plant life. These cooler colors are naturally more calming to look at, especially in a darkened room when you're trying to fall asleep. The sky has this gradient that shifts between deeper blues and softer purples, creating visual interest without being stimulating. The water reflects these colors, creating this harmonious visual environment where everything fits together. What's really special about these toilet planet scenes is the sound design. When Rick is sitting on his toilet, we hear this perfect mix of nature sounds, gentle water flowing, distant animal calls that sound like birds but slightly alien, and soft breeze rustling through the vegetation. These natural ambient sounds combine to create what is essentially a sleep soundtrack embedded within the episode. The sound designers clearly understood that this environment needed to feel like a genuine sanctuary, so they created this audio landscape that feels both alien and familiar at the same time. Throughout the episode, we keep coming back to this theme of finding peace in solitude. Rick has created this private space because he needs somewhere to be completely alone with his thoughts. This idea resonates really well with that pre-sleep mindset when we're trying to let go of social concerns and find some mental quiet. After a day of dealing with other people and their demands, Rick escapes to this place where nobody can bother him. There's something very relatable about that need for a personal space where you can just exist without having to perform for others. The episode's ending gives us one of the most genuinely peaceful moments in the entire series. After Rick finally confronts the alien who used his toilet, who ends up dying from unrelated causes, Rick returns to his special bathroom. We see him sitting alone on his toilet watching the sunset over the alien landscape. The animation slows down, the music becomes this gentle, ambient piece, and for once, Rick doesn't have some cynical comment or joke to make. He just exists in this moment of solitude and reflection. For a character who's usually frenetic and always talking, this quiet moment of contemplation shows a completely different side of Rick. There's something about the concept of having a personal sanctuary that connects with our need for mental safe spaces before sleep. Most of us don't have beautiful alien planets we can escape to, but we can understand this desire to have somewhere that's just for us. As we're trying to fall asleep, we often need to create that mental equivalent, a space in our minds where we can let go of the day's stresses and find some peace. Watching Rick find this solace might help viewers access that same feeling of sanctuary. The ending isn't just visually peaceful. The musical score during these final toilet scenes contains some of the show's most unexpected lullaby-like moments. The composers created this gentle melody that plays as Rick sits watching the sunset. It's simple, slightly melancholic, but ultimately soothing. The music doesn't have any sudden changes or jarring notes that might disrupt the calm atmosphere. Instead, it maintains this consistent emotional tone that guides viewers toward a relaxed state. How does the old man in the seat combine weirdness with a surprisingly peaceful ending? By showing that even the most chaotic character in the series needs quiet moments of reflection in beautiful surroundings. The episode takes the crude concept of a toilet and transforms it into this metaphor for finding personal space in a chaotic universe. It shows that underneath all of Rick's scientific genius and cynical exterior, he's still someone who appreciates beauty and solitude. The final image of Rick sitting quietly as colors shift in the sky creates this perfect bedtime viewing moment, a character finding peace, which might help viewers find their own. These peaceful alien vistas contain some of the show's most thoughtful moments, where the usual rapid-fire jokes and scientific concepts give way to something more contemplative. The scenes work so well for nighttime viewing because they give our brains permission to slow down and appreciate stillness, something that's essential for transitioning into sleep. The episode starts with a scene that looks normal at first glance but quickly turns strange. Rick is standing in the Smith family living room, with a mess of cables and weird equipment around him. He's just finished installing something he calls interdimensional cable on their TV set. Morty stands nearby with this mix of fascination and worry on his face, like he's seen enough of Rick's inventions to know things might go sideways. The rest of the family, Jerry, Beth, and Summer, gather around, not knowing what they're about to witness. Rick explains his modification in that typical know-it-all way of his. "I basically upgraded your cable package," he tells them, waving his hands dismissively like it's no big deal. This device lets us watch TV from infinite realities. You're gonna see stuff you've never seen before, stuff that makes your Earth TV look like it was made by babies. The family doesn't really get what he means yet. How different could TV from other dimensions really be? But Rick knows. He's seen it all before, and he has this little smirk that says they have no idea what they're in for. As the family settles on the couch and Rick starts flipping through channels, the true weirdness begins. The first few channels seem almost normal, just slightly off versions of shows they recognize. But then things take a turn. The commercials and shows become increasingly bizarre with each channel change. There's no consistency, no familiar patterns, nothing that makes sense by Earth standards. One channel shows what looks like a cooking show, but the chef is made entirely of tentacles and keeps dissolving into the food. Another shows an action movie where the hero and villain are both played by sentient pieces of toast. What makes these channels so unsettling is how the animation style keeps changing. One second, they're watching something that looks like it was drawn by a 5-year-old with crayons, all wobbly lines and basic shapes. The next channel might show hyper-realistic human faces with too many teeth and eyes that follow you. Some channels feature stop-motion animation with objects that shouldn't be moving, while others have this pulsing, breathing quality that makes the family feel uncomfortable just looking at it. The visual whiplash adds to the sense that nothing is stable or predictable in these other dimensions. Rick sits there completely unfazed by all of this, sipping from his flask and occasionally laughing at things the family doesn't understand. "See that? That's actually a documentary in that dimension," he explains at one point, pointing to what looks like geometric shapes screaming at each other. "That's how they do politics." Jerry looks horrified. Beth seems intrigued but disturbed, and Summer alternates between disgust and taking pictures with her phone. Their reactions are all over the place, which makes sense considering the craziness they're witnessing. But Morty's reactions are different. While everyone else's attention jumps from channel to channel with predictable responses, Morty seems to be anticipating certain commercials. He keeps glancing at Rick whenever specific types of ads start playing, and there's tension in his shoulders that wasn't there before. When a commercial featuring talking birds comes on, Morty shifts uncomfortably. When another shows a sunny field with strange flowers, he looks down at his hands. It's subtle at first, but as they continue watching, his behavior becomes more noticeable. Then something really strange happens. As Rick flips to a particular channel, a colorful commercial starts playing. We don't see what's on the screen yet, but the effect on Morty is immediate and dramatic. He freezes completely. His eyes go wide, his breath catches, and for a second it looks like he might actually pass out. Rick notices this reaction and quickly changes the channel, muttering something about boring commercials before anyone else can comment. But the moment hangs in the air, unexplained. This first interdimensional cable episode introduced a concept that would become one of the most popular recurring formats in Rick and Morty. Fans loved these segments so much that the creators brought them back multiple times throughout the series. The format was perfect for the show. It allowed for completely random, unconnected bits of weirdness that didn't need to make sense or follow any rules. The creators could just throw in whatever bizarre ideas they had without worrying about fitting them into a larger story. What made these cable segments so special was their improvised quality. Many of the commercials and TV snippets were actually improvised by the voice actors, especially Justin Roiland, who voices both Rick and Morty. The dialogue would often include stammers, repetitions, and sudden changes in direction that made everything feel even more unstable and weird. This improvisation led to some of the most memorable and strange moments in the entire series. The random nature of these commercials might seem meaningless at first, but they actually reveal a lot about how the show works. Rick and Morty has always played with the idea that in an infinite multiverse, literally anything is possible. These commercials make that concept visible in a way that's both funny and unsettling. If there are infinite realities, then of course there would be one where a man with ants in his eyes sells furniture, or where people use sentient creatures as currency. The absurdity has its own internal logic. What's impressive about these segments is how they manage to be completely chaotic while still feeling like they belong in the same universe. Each commercial or show snippet has its own rules and logic, but they all share this quality of being just a few degrees removed from things we recognize. They're like funhouse mirror versions of familiar TV tropes, advertisements, action movies, talk shows, twisted just enough to become completely alien. The Smith family's different reactions to interdimensional cable also tell us a lot about who they are. Jerry is disturbed by the chaos and keeps trying to find patterns or meaning. Beth is fascinated by the glimpses into other lives and possibilities. Summer treats it like a novelty, something to post about on social media. And Rick, who's seen it all before, just enjoys watching everyone else's reactions. But Morty's response is the most interesting, hinting at experiences and memories we don't know about yet. As the family continues channel surfing, we get the sense that there's something more going on with Morty. His reactions aren't just about the weirdness they're watching now. They seem connected to something that happened before. The commercial that made him freeze up completely must have triggered something, some memory or association that the others don't share. It's a subtle thread of narrative running through what otherwise seems like random entertainment, suggesting that even in the weirdest episodes of Rick and Morty, there's often an emotional story hiding beneath the surface. As Rick continues flipping through channels, they land on a commercial that instantly becomes one of the most memorable moments in interdimensional cable. The screen shows what at first looks like a normal electronics store until the camera zooms in on the salesman. This isn't your average TV pitchman. This is Ants in My Eyes Johnson, a man with exactly what his name suggests, actual ants crawling around inside his eyeballs. The family all leans forward at once, their expressions a mix of disgust and fascination. The character's eyes are literally swarming with tiny insects moving around beneath his eyelids, creating this unsettling visual that's impossible to look away from. What makes the commercial even stranger is Ants, in my eyes. Johnson's complete lack of concern about his condition. He introduces himself with this cheerful salesman enthusiasm. I'm Ants in My Eyes Johnson. Everything's black. I can't see a thing, and I also can't feel anything either. There's something both horrifying and hilarious about how matter-of-factly he states this, like having insects in your eyes is just a minor inconvenience rather than a medical emergency. The character continues his sales pitch about the amazing deals in his electronics store, completely oblivious to his surroundings. As the commercial plays out, we see Morty actually laughing at first. It starts as this genuine burst of surprise, the kind of laugh that comes when something is so unexpected and absurd that you can't help yourself. But there's something off about his laughter. It goes on slightly too long, has this edge of nervousness to it, and doesn't quite reach his eyes. While the rest of the family is just taking in the bizarre spectacle, Morty's reaction seems heightened, almost like he's trying to convince himself that it's just funny and nothing more. The commercial gets progressively more absurd as it continues. In the background of the electronics store, pure chaos unfolds. People are literally stealing televisions right off the shelves. Someone walks out with a microwave under their arm without paying. Another person drives a car straight through the wall of the store. All of this happens while Ants in My Eyes Johnson continues his enthusiastic sales pitch, completely unaware of the theft happening all around him. I hope our prices aren't too low, he shouts as someone unplugs a TV and carries it out the door right behind him. Rick, who's been sipping from his flask, points to the screen with a knowing look. See, this is why interdimensional cable is superior to our garbage, he says. Their commercials don't need to make sense. They don't need logical plots or reasonable characters or happy endings. They just need to stick in your brain like a parasite. He taps his temple with his finger. In that dimension, this guy's probably more famous than any celebrity we have here. Everyone remembers Ants in My Eyes Johnson. The family's reactions to the commercial split along predictable lines. Summer actually takes out her phone and starts recording the screen, saying something about how this would blow up on her social media. Beth laughs and shakes her head, clearly finding the dark humor in the character's oblivious suffering. But Jerry, always the most conventional family member, looks genuinely troubled by what he's seeing. Doesn't that dimension have health regulations? He asks. Or disability laws? Why would someone with a serious medical condition and no ability to see or feel be allowed to operate a business? Who's insuring him? Who's writing his licenses? Rick rolls his eyes at Jerry's questions. Not every dimension is wrapped up in your boring bureaucracy, Jerry. Some places just let the free market sort itself out. If you can't see or feel anything but you still manage to run a store, more power to you. While this exchange happens, the camera catches something subtle. Morty's initial laughter has completely faded. He's still watching the screen, but his expression has changed. His eyes dart around the room, not focusing on the TV anymore. There's this nervous energy to him, like he's suddenly aware of something no one else is noticing. He keeps glancing at the windows of the living room, then back at Rick, then down at his hands. It's the behavior of someone who's just remembered something uncomfortable, something they were trying to forget. The Ants in My Eyes. Johnson commercial wraps up with the character standing in his store as prices flash across the screen, completely unaware that the building is now on fire behind him. So come on down to Ants in My Eyes, Johnson's Electronics, he shouts with his arms spread wide while flames engulf the shelves. I mean, I can't see if you do or not because, again, I have ants in my eyes. The commercial cuts abruptly to another channel, but the image lingers. This commercial perfectly demonstrates how Rick and Morty uses body horror mixed with surreal comedy to create something strangely memorable. Body horror typically makes viewers uncomfortable by showing bodies being distorted or violated in some way. In most shows or movies, seeing insects crawling around inside someone's eyes would be played for straight horror. But Rick and Morty turns it into something weirdly funny by pairing it with the structure of a cheesy local TV commercial. The contrast between the horrifying visual and the familiar format creates this unsettling comedy that somehow becomes comfortable in its absurdity. What's interesting about these interdimensional cable segments is how they eventually become almost soothing to watch. The first viewing is shocking. Ants in eyes, bizarre premises, chaotic backgrounds. But as viewers get used to the rhythm of these commercials, there's something almost predictable about their unpredictability. You know each channel will show something weird and unexpected, and that very expectation of unexpectedness creates a strange comfort zone. It's like listening to jazz. Once you accept that the notes might go anywhere, you can relax into the chaos. The commercial also works because it follows a twisted but recognizable logic. Of course, someone who can't see or feel anything would be oblivious to people stealing from their store. Of course, they wouldn't notice a fire. There's a dark but consistent internal reasoning to everything that happens. This logical consistency underneath the surface weirdness is what makes Rick and Morty's humor work so well. Even the most bizarre scenarios follow their own rules. But beneath the surface comedy, Morty's changing reaction to the commercial suggests something deeper happening in this episode. His initial laughter giving way to nervous glances hints at some connection between what they're watching and something he experienced. The seemingly random channel surfing might actually be triggering specific memories for Morty. His discomfort grows with each passing commercial, creating this subtle emotional through line beneath what appears to be just a collection of weird animations. The increasing unease Morty displays suggests there's more going on than just a family watching strange TV together. Something about these glimpses into other dimensions is affecting him personally, stirring up memories or feelings he'd rather keep buried. This undercurrent of emotion beneath the random comedy is what makes Rick and Morty so effective. Even in its weirdest, most absurd moments, there's often a deeper emotional story waiting to be uncovered. The channel changes again, and this time we see a commercial featuring a man standing in front of several doors in what looks like a showroom. He's wearing a plain suit and has this manic energy as he frantically moves from door to door, trying to open each one. But here's the catch. None of the doors actually open. They're all attached to walls but don't lead anywhere. The salesman turns to the camera with way too much enthusiasm and shouts, "Hey, are you tired of real doors cluttering up your house where you open them and they actually go somewhere? Get on down to real fake doors." He tries another door handle, yanking on it repeatedly to prove it doesn't open. That's our slogan. What are you worried about? Come get a fake door today. The Smith family watches as the commercial continues with the salesman demonstrating door after door, all fake, all attached to standing walls in the middle of a showroom floor. The repetitive nature of the pitch is almost hypnotic. He goes through the exact same motions with each door. Grab handle, pull hard, show it doesn't open, move to the next one. His energy never dips as he repeats essentially the same line over and over. Won't open. Won't open. Not this one, not this one. None of them open. There's something weirdly mesmerizing about the pure commitment to such a pointless product. While Beth, Summer, and Jerry laugh at the ridiculous concept, the camera lingers on Morty. He started off with a smile, but as the commercial keeps going, his expression changes. His eyes widen slightly, his posture stiffens, and he starts rubbing his palms on his jeans. There's a growing tension in his face that doesn't match the relatively innocent nature of what they're watching. This commercial is clearly silly, but not disturbing like the Ants in My Eyes Johnson ad, which makes Morty's escalating anxiety seem out of place. The commercial takes an unexpected turn when the salesman suddenly announces, "Hey everybody, so, this is me in my regular daily life." The scene shifts to show him leaving the fake door store, getting in his car, and driving home. The family looks confused. The commercial seems to be over, with the product pitch completed, but instead of ending, it just keeps following this guy's regular life. He pulls into his driveway, walks inside his house, and makes himself a sandwich in real time. There's no background music, no voiceover, just the mundane actions of a man making lunch after work. See, in some dimensions, commercials don't have time limits, Rick explains, gesturing at the screen with his flask. They don't need snappy endings or even coherent messages. Sometimes they just keep going until someone at the station decides to play something else. He takes a swig and adds, "Some dimensions have commercials that last for days. People just leave their TVs on and go about their lives while the same ad plays over and over in the background. Actually increases sales because the product gets burned into your subconscious." The commercial continues with the salesman now stuck in traffic. He sits in his car, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel and looking bored. The camera just stays on him, not cutting away, not adding any new information about the fake doors. It's just a man in traffic, in real time, with all the boring reality that entails. The absurdity isn't in what's happening, but in the fact that this is still supposedly a commercial. Jerry reaches for the remote, clearly bored with watching traffic. "Let's find something else. This is just..." Rick slaps Jerry's hand away from the remote with surprising intensity. "Don't touch it. There's something important here. You need to see how this ends." His tone has shifted from casual to insistent, and he gives a quick sideways glance at Morty before focusing back. On the screen. As the commercial continues with the man still sitting in traffic, the camera catches Morty's hands beginning to tremble slightly. He notices this himself and quickly tucks his hands under his legs, trying to hide the reaction from the rest of the family. There's a thin layer of sweat on his forehead now, and his breathing has become slightly more rapid. Whatever is happening to Morty seems to be getting worse, even though the commercial itself remains relatively innocent and mundane compared to the others they've seen. The traffic finally clears and the salesman arrives back at his store. He walks straight to the camera and says with the same energy as before, "Still here, still selling fake doors." Then he goes right back to the exact same routine, grabbing door handles and showing they don't open. It's like the entire middle section of the commercial never happened. The circular nature of the ad creates this strange loop where nothing is gained and nothing is lost. The The salesman is just eternally trying to open doors that will never open. What makes the real fake doors commercial so effective is how it uses repetition and anti-humor to create a strange sense of comfort through predictability. The commercial establishes a pattern, showing doors that don't open, and then sticks to that pattern religiously. Even after the bizarre detour into the salesman's personal life, the commercial returns to exactly where it started. There's something weirdly satisfying about this structural loop, like a song that returns to its chorus. The viewer knows exactly what's coming next, and that predictability becomes oddly soothing after the chaos of interdimensional channel surfing. The commercial also plays with expectations by extending far beyond what a typical advertisement would include. Just when you think it's over, it continues into areas that have nothing to do with the product. This subversion of commercial structure is a perfect example of how Rick and Morty often takes familiar formats and stretches them until they become something else entirely. The fake doors themselves serve as a metaphor for this approach. They look like functional doors but lead nowhere, just as the commercial looks like a normal ad but doesn't function like one. By the time the commercial finally ends, with the salesman still demonstrating fake doors with undiminished enthusiasm, Morty looks like he's barely holding it together. His face is pale, his hands are still hidden under his legs to stop the visible trembling, and he's biting his lower lip so hard it's turning white. What's most striking is that there's nothing overtly traumatic or disturbing about the real fake doors commercial. It's weird and pointless, but not scary or graphic, like some of the other interdimensional content they've seen. The disconnect between the commercial's relatively innocent content and Morty's intense reactions suggests something deeper is happening. This seemingly random ad must be triggering something specific in Morty's memory or subconscious. The fake doors themselves, objects that appear to offer passage but actually trap you where you are, seem to have particular significance to him. His reaction hints at a past experience involving doors, passages, or being trapped that we haven't yet been shown. Rick's insistence that the family watch the entire commercial, combined with his concerned glances at Morty, suggests he knows exactly why this particular ad is affecting his grandson. There's clearly history here, some adventure or trauma that Rick is aware of, but the rest of the family isn't. The seemingly innocent real fake doors commercial has unexpectedly become a window into Morty's psychological state, revealing that beneath the random channel surfing, there's a more personal story unfolding. The channel changes again and we see what looks like a movie trailer start playing. The screen shows two ordinary-looking guys standing back-to-back in what seems like a typical action movie pose. A deep movie announcer voice starts narrating, "In a world where there are 8 John Michael Vincents and 16 quadrants, 2 brothers." The voice sounds slightly unprofessional, like the person isn't a trained voice actor but is trying their best to sound like one. As the narrator continues, something unusual happens. He starts laughing slightly between phrases, almost like he's making up the plot as he goes along. The trailer shows the 2 brothers running from explosions, jumping over obstacles, and doing typical action movie things. But the narrator's voice keeps adding increasingly bizarre threats. 2 brothers, in a van, and then a meteor hit, and they ran as fast as they could from giant cat monsters. And then a giant tornado came. And that's when things got knocked into 12th gear. Each new threat seems completely unrelated to the previous one, creating this patchwork plot that makes absolutely no sense. As the commercial plays, the Smith family really gets into it. Jerry is actually laughing out loud, slapping his knee and pointing at the screen. "This is the best one yet," he says between laughs. Summer has her phone out, obviously recording this to share later. Beth is chuckling too, shaking her head at the absurdity of it all. Rick has this knowing smile, clearly enjoying the family's reactions more than the trailer itself. But Morty isn't laughing. He's sitting very still, his shoulders tense, eyes fixed on the screen but not with amusement, with what looks almost like dread. The narrator continues, barely containing his laughter now. A Mexican armada shows up, with weapons made from tomatoes, and you better bet your bottom dollar that these 2 brothers know how to handle business. The improvised quality of the voiceover is obvious now. The narrator stumbles over words, repeats himself, and seems to be genuinely amusing himself with each new addition to the plot. And then an asteroid hit, and they ran as fast as they could from giant cat monsters, And then a giant tornado came. Rick gestures at the screen with his flask. See, this right here proves my whole point about infinite dimensions. No matter how ridiculous something sounds, it has to exist somewhere in the multiverse. This movie? He points at the screen where the two brothers are now fighting what appears to be old women. This exact movie, with this exact plot, is a real blockbuster in some dimension, probably won awards. Jerry wipes tears of laughter from his eyes. But it's so stupid. The narrator can't even get through it without laughing. He points at the screen where the plot has somehow expanded to include alien invasion, tomato monster Mexican Armada brothers, who are just regular brothers running in a van from an asteroid, and all sorts of things. The movie. Rick shrugs. Yeah, well, in that dimension, maybe improvised narration is what they consider high art. Maybe their Citizen Kane has a narrator who just makes stuff up while giggling. He takes another swig from his flask. Or maybe this is actually a documentary. Ever think of that? Maybe somewhere out there, these exact events happen to two regular brothers. The idea that such an absurd sequence of events could be real somewhere in the multiverse seems to hit a nerve with Morty. His breathing gets quicker, and he wraps his arms around himself in what looks like a self-soothing gesture. The randomness of the trailer's threats, meteors, armadas, monsters, old women, isn't just funny nonsense to him. It seems to remind him of something. Beth notices Morty's reaction and places a hand on his shoulder. Sweetie, are you feeling okay? You don't look so good. Her voice has that concerned mother tone, picking up on the fact that while everyone else is enjoying the absurdity, something about it is genuinely upsetting her son. Morty flinches slightly at her touch before quickly forcing a smile. Yeah, I'm fine. Just a little tired, I guess. But his eyes keep darting back to the TV screen where the two brothers are now facing a horde of gear-headed scorpions. There's something specific he seems to be watching for, something he's expecting or dreading to see on the screen. Each new threat the narrator adds makes Morty tense up a little more, as if he's waiting for a particular combination of words or images to appear. The trailer builds to its climax with the narrator now full-on laughing while trying to describe the movie. Two brothers. It's just called Two Brothers. The simplicity of the title compared to the chaotic plot is the final punchline, and the narrator can't even maintain his movie voice anymore, breaking completely into laughter as the title card appears. This Two Brothers trailer really shows how Rick and Morty uses meta-humor and improvisation to create moments that feel genuinely spontaneous. The narrator's barely contained laughter and the stream of consciousness plot additions create the feeling that we're watching something being made up on the spot rather than a carefully scripted segment. This approach breaks the fourth wall in a subtle way. Instead of characters directly addressing the audience, the production process itself becomes visible through the improvised quality of the performance. The trailer's endless escalation of random threats mirrors the way Rick and Morty's actual adventures tend to unfold. Just like in the show's main plots, where problems cascade and multiply in unpredictable ways, the two brothers find themselves facing an ever-growing list of bizarre enemies and obstacles. The line between the fiction they're watching and the reality they live in starts to blur. Is their interdimensional channel surfing really that different from the random chaos of the two brothers' world? This self-referential quality is key to the show's humor, creating layers of reality that comment on each other. Rick's point about infinite dimensions adds another layer to the comedy. In a truly infinite multiverse, even the most absurd combination of events must be happening somewhere. This becomes a meta-commentary on the show's own storytelling. No matter how random or bizarre the writers make Rick and Morty's adventures, they can always justify it through the concept of infinite realities. The Two Brothers trailer serves as a microcosm of this approach, compressing the show's entire philosophical underpinning into a one-minute fake movie preview. The family's different reactions to the trailer highlight the emotional threads running beneath the episode's seemingly random surface. Jerry's unrestrained amusement shows his simple enjoyment of the absurd. Beth's focus on Morty's well-being reveals her maternal instincts, breaking through even during casual TV viewing. Rick's analytical take on the multiverse implications demonstrates his constant scientific framing of everything they encounter. And Morty's growing discomfort suggests that for him, the random, chaotic nature of existence isn't just a philosophical concept. It's something he's experienced firsthand in ways that have left emotional scars. As the trailer ends and Rick changes the channel again, the contrast between the family's reactions has created a subtle tension. Something about these interdimensional glimpses is affecting Morty differently than everyone else. The comedy of the Two Brothers trailer has unexpectedly opened a window into the emotional dynamics of the Smith family, showing how even shared laughter can highlight the different ways they each process the bizarre reality of living with access to infinite dimensions. Rick flips to the next channel, and they're greeted by a show entirely different from the movie trailer they just watched. The screen shows a sterile, white set with a single man standing in the center. He's wearing a plain black shirt and has this intense, almost uncomfortable look on his face. "This is Personal Space," the man announces directly to the camera, "and I'm your host, Philip Jacobs." The set is minimalist, with nothing but the host standing there, looking slightly agitated as he introduces his show. The host immediately launches into what seems to be the show's standard format. "Up first in our show, we have Personal Space." He holds up one finger to emphasize this point. He then begins listing various steps to ensure personal space, starting with 1. Personal space. The family watches as he continues with increasingly obvious steps. 2. Personal space. 3. Stay out of my personal space. 4. Keep away from my personal space. Each new step is essentially the same idea repeated in slightly different words. "What kind of show is this?" Jerry asks, looking confused. "It's just a guy saying personal space over and over." Rick shrugs. Some dimensions get fixated on really simple concepts. This guy built his whole identity around not wanting people near him. Got a whole TV show out of it, too. The host continues his list, growing more intense with each step. 5. Get out of that personal space. 6. Stay away from my personal space. His voice gets louder, his eyes wider, and his gestures more emphatic. The family watches with a mix of confusion and amusement as the host becomes increasingly agitated about his personal space, despite being completely alone on the set with no one invading his space at all. Then the show takes an unexpected and disturbing turn. 7, the host announces, grabbing the collar of his shirt. "Keep away from my personal space." He suddenly starts pulling at his own clothes, tearing his shirt off to reveal his chest. 8, he continues, now moving his hands to his own face. "Personal space." Then, in a moment that makes everyone in the room gasp, he actually grips his own skin and starts pulling it off his face and body. "Oh my God," Summer exclaims, quickly covering her eyes but peeking through her fingers. Beth makes a sound of disgust, turning away slightly but not completely. Jerry looks like he might be sick. Rick just nods, knowledgeably. See, in that dimension, they take metaphors literally. When this guy says he wants to protect his personal space, he means he doesn't even want to be inside his own body. He takes another swig from his flask, completely unfazed by the disturbing imagery. That's his actual skin he's peeling off, by the way, not a costume. In that dimension, they can regenerate skin like lizards shed theirs. On screen, the host continues removing large sheets of his own skin, revealing the red muscle tissue underneath. What makes it even more disturbing is how calmly he continues his presentation while doing this self-mutilation. 9. Personal space, he says, now standing there as mostly exposed muscle and tendons, still talking directly to the camera as if nothing unusual is happening. While most of the family reacts with shock and revulsion, Morty's response is noticeably different. Instead of looking away or expressing disgust, he leans forward slightly, his eyes fixed on the screen. There's this intense focus in his expression, almost like he's studying what's happening rather than just watching it. His previous anxiety seems temporarily forgotten, replaced by this strange fascination with the host's extreme behavior. "Oh, gross. Can we please change the channel?" Summer asks, still peeking through her fingers. This is seriously disturbing. "Yeah, Rick, I'm with Summer on this one," Jerry adds, looking slightly green. "There has to be something less skinless we can watch." Rick reaches for the remote, but before he can change the channel, Morty speaks up. "Wait," he says quietly, his voice different from how he sounded. "All evening." Maybe we should keep watching this one. It's the first time he's expressed any interest in staying on a particular channel, and the contrast with his previous nervous behavior is striking. Everyone turns to look at Morty with varying degrees of surprise. Rick's eyebrow raises and he gives Morty a long, assessing look. There's something in Rick's expression, not just surprise, but a flash of understanding, maybe even concern. He seems to recognize something in Morty's sudden interest that the others don't pick up on. "You want to keep watching the skin-peeling guy?" Summer asks incredulously. "What is wrong with you?" Morty doesn't look away from the screen as he responds. I think it's interesting how far he's willing to go. He believes in this one thing so much that he'll literally tear himself apart for it." There's something in Morty's voice, a quiet intensity that doesn't match the casual channel surfing mood from earlier. On screen, the host has removed almost all of his visible skin and stands there as a grotesque figure of exposed muscle and tissue. Now, let's give it up for the host of Personal Space, Philip Jacobs. An off-screen announcer introduces the host who is already there, adding another layer of absurdity to the disturbing scene. The skinless host then looks directly into the camera and delivers his final message. "I don't even want this skin in my personal space." Rick studies Morty's face for another moment before nodding slowly. "All right, we'll stick with Skin Man for a bit longer." He settles back into his seat, but his eyes flick between the TV and Morty, watching his grandson's reactions more than the show itself. This segment perfectly shows how Rick and Morty uses body horror and obsessive characters to create moments that stick with viewers long after the episode ends. The personal space host isn't just weird. He represents an idea taken to its most extreme, illogical conclusion. The show starts with a simple, relatable concept that most people understand: wanting personal space, and then pushes it past all reasonable boundaries until it becomes something grotesque and fascinating. This progression from normal to extreme is a storytelling technique the show uses repeatedly, finding humor and disturbing insights in seeing how far an idea can go. Rick's explanation about dimensions fixating on simple concepts also reveals something about how the show approaches its multiverse. Every strange thing they see isn't just random weirdness. It represents a world with its own internal logic, however twisted. The Personal Space show makes perfect sense in a dimension where people take metaphors literally and can regenerate skin. This commitment to creating consistent rules, even for the most bizarre scenarios, is part of what makes Rick and Morty's multiverse feel somehow believable despite its absurdity. Morty's unusual interest in this particular segment marks an important shift in the episode. Up until now, he's been anxious, uncomfortable, trying to avoid certain channels or content. But something about the Personal Space host's extreme dedication has captured his attention in a way nothing else has. This change in Morty's behavior begins to suggest that whatever is bothering him might be connected to ideas of identity, boundaries, or commitment to a principle regardless of the personal cost. His fascination with watching someone literally tear themselves apart hints at emotional wounds of his own, perhaps experiences where he too felt torn apart in some way. Rick's reaction to Morty's sudden interest suggests he understands more than he's letting on. The look he gives Morty isn't just surprise, it's recognition. Rick sees something in Morty's response that connects to experiences they've shared, adventures the rest of the family doesn't know about. This subtle exchange between them adds another layer to what initially seemed like random channel surfing, suggesting that Rick might have a specific purpose in showing Morty these interdimensional broadcasts. Just as the family is getting used to the rhythm of the bizarre commercials, the channel suddenly changes again. This time, it's not a commercial or a weird show with a single-minded host. Instead, the screen shows something that makes everyone in the room go completely silent. It's them. Not exactly them, but versions of them in what looks like a slightly different reality. The animation style is the same as their world, but small details are off. Different clothes, different hairstyles, and most notably, different life circumstances. Whoa, what is this? Summer is the first to break the silence, leaning forward with wide eyes. The screen shows an alternate version of herself, accepting some kind of award on a stage, dressed in formal attire that their Summer would never wear. Is that me? Rick nods, taking a swig from his flask. Yep, we've moved past the random commercials. This channel broadcasts actual footage from parallel dimensions. Think of it like reality TV, except it's actually reality, just not our reality. He gestures at the screen with his flask. These are versions of you guys who made slightly different choices at various points in your lives, or had slightly different luck, or both. The family watches, transfixed, as the camera pans across various versions of their alternate selves. There's Jerry in a sleek office, confidently leading a meeting with people who actually seem to respect him. He's wearing an expensive suit, his hair is perfectly styled, and he has this air of authority that their Jerry completely lacks. The real Jerry's mouth hangs open slightly as he watches this successful doppelganger command the room. Is that really me? Jerry asks, his voice small and uncertain. I look like I know what I'm doing. Rick smirks. In that reality, you didn't drop out of community college, got your advertising degree, worked your way up, and now you're some big-shot creative director. Probably makes 7 figures. He glances sideways at the real Jerry. That version of you also stood up to Beth's father when you first met him. Didn't let him walk all over you. Funny how one conversation can change everything, huh? The channel shifts to show an alternate Beth, dressed in surgical scrubs, performing a complex operation on a horse. She moves with absolute confidence, giving instructions to a team of assistants who hang on her every word. This Beth doesn't just look like a vet. She looks like a world-renowned veterinary surgeon at the top of her field. The real Beth leans forward, her eyes fixed on the screen. I actually finished vet school, she whispers, more to herself than anyone else. Her expression is a complex mix of fascination and regret. I'm actually doing what I always wanted to do. That Beth never got pregnant in high school, Rick explains, his tone unusually gentle. Went straight to vet school, specialized in equine surgery. She's written 3 textbooks and developed a new technique for spinal repair in large mammals. He doesn't add anything else, doesn't need to. The implication hangs in the air. This Beth chose her career over having a family with Jerry. Summer's alternate self appears on screen again, this time in what looks like a college graduation ceremony. Then it shifts to show her getting married, then working in what appears to be a research lab. The montage continues, showing various stages of a life that looks purposeful and fulfilled in ways that make the real Summer shift uncomfortably on the couch. So in other dimensions, I actually have my shit together? Summer asks, trying to sound casual but unable to hide the hint of envy in her voice. I don't just sit around wasting time on my phone? In infinite dimensions, there are infinite versions of you, Rick explains. Some better off, some worse. This channel tends to showcase the more successful ones. Better ratings, I guess. While Beth, Jerry, and Summer remain focused on their alternate selves, watching with this strange mix of fascination and discomfort, Morty's reaction is completely different. He's become increasingly agitated as the parallel reality footage continues. His hands grip the couch cushions tightly, his knuckles turning white. His breathing has become shallow and quick, and there's a sheen of sweat on his forehead. The channel keeps changing, showing more alternate versions of the Smith family. An alternate Jerry winning an award for his advertising campaign. An alternate Beth giving a TED Talk about veterinary innovations. An alternate Summer leading a tech startup. And in each reality, the family seems happier, more successful, more fulfilled than they are in their current lives. These aren't just possibilities, you know, Rick says, watching the screen with a strange expression. These are actual realities happening right now. Somewhere out there, these versions of you are living these lives. They're as real as you are. This statement seems to hit each family member differently. Jerry looks down at his hands, as if comparing them to the confident gestures of his successful alternate self. Beth takes a long sip of wine, her eyes never leaving the surgeon version of herself on screen. Summer begins typing something into her phone, perhaps searching for information about colleges or career paths. But Morty's reaction is the most extreme. As the screen shows yet another happy, successful version of the Smith family, he suddenly stands up. His movement is so abrupt that everyone turns to look at him. Change the channel, Morty says, his voice shaking slightly with emotion. Please, Rick, change it. There's something raw in his tone, something beyond the nervousness he's shown with the previous channels. This seems to cut deeper, to touch something fundamental. Rick looks at Morty for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without comment, he points the remote at the TV and changes the channel. The alternate Smiths disappear, replaced by some alien game show with contestants that look like sentient fungi. The tension in the room doesn't immediately dissipate. Beth, Jerry, and Summer all look slightly shell-shocked from seeing their alternative lives. But it's Morty who seems most affected. He remains standing, his hands clenched at his sides, looking like he might either cry or scream at any moment. This segment reveals the emotional core beneath the episode's seemingly random structure. What started as a simple showcase of weird interdimensional TV has transformed into something much more personal and affecting. These aren't just funny commercials or strange shows. They're windows into lives that could have been, possibilities that branched off from decisions made or not made. For the Smith family, seeing these alternate versions of themselves forces them to confront their own choices, regrets, and unfulfilled potential. The stark contrast between the previous, absurd commercials and this glimpse into parallel realities creates an emotional whiplash that mirrors the family's reactions. The silly, nonsensical ads were easy to laugh at from a distance. But watching versions of themselves living different, arguably better, lives hits them where they're most vulnerable. It transforms the random channel surfing into something with real emotional stakes. Morty's extreme reaction to seeing these alternate realities sets up the deeper emotional revelation that's building throughout the episode. While the rest of his family is fascinated by their alternate selves, Morty seems actively distressed by them. This suggests that whatever is bothering him isn't just about weird commercials or bizarre imagery. It's connected to something more fundamental about reality, identity, and the paths not taken. The channel changes again, and the screen shows something completely different from all the bizarre commercials they've been watching. Instead of the disturbing imagery of skin being peeled off or ants crawling in eyes, this commercial looks almost normal. The scene shows a bright, colorful marketplace where people are walking around with transparent containers filled with beautiful butterflies. The butterflies have wings in every imaginable color: electric blues, vibrant purples, shimmering greens, and golden yellows. A cheerful narrator's voice explains, "In Dimension J142, we've revolutionized the concept of currency. Why use boring paper money or cold metal coins when nature has provided us with the most beautiful currency of all?" The commercial shows a smiling woman opening her butterfly container and carefully selecting a small blue butterfly to hand to a merchant in exchange for a basket of fruit. The transaction looks peaceful and pleasant. The butterfly gently flutters from the container to the merchant's waiting hands, and both parties seem completely satisfied with the exchange. Our butterfly-based economy has created a society where beauty and natural harmony are valued above all, the narrator continues, as the commercial shows various scenes of people using butterflies as money. A man buys coffee with a tiny yellow butterfly. A child hands over a pink one to get an ice cream cone. A couple presents a large, particularly spectacular purple butterfly to what appears to be a real estate agent, who then hands them keys to a house. Everyone in the commercial looks happy and content, living in this colorful world where beautiful living creatures serve as their medium of exchange. The commercial itself seems harmless, especially compared to what the family has already watched. There's no body horror, no one peeling off their skin, no disturbing imagery at all, just pretty butterflies and smiling people. But the moment it appears on screen, Morty's reaction is immediate and extreme. The color drains from his face so quickly, it's as if someone flipped a switch. His eyes widen, pupils dilated with what can only be described as pure terror. His breathing suddenly becomes rapid and shallow, almost like he's hyperventilating. "Turn it off," Morty says, his voice barely above a whisper at first. Then louder, with increasing panic, "Turn it off! Change the channel, Rick. Change it now!" His hands grip the couch cushion so tightly his knuckles turn white, and he looks like he might actually pass out. The rest of the family turns to look at Morty in confusion. They've just spent the evening watching commercials featuring a man tearing his own skin off, another man with insects crawling in his eyes, and all manner of disturbing content without Morty showing this level of distress. But now, facing a commercial about butterflies, he's completely falling apart. "Morty, what?" Summer starts to ask, looking genuinely concerned. Jerry, missing the gravity of the situation entirely, tries to lighten the mood. "Whoa, Morty, do you have some kind of butterfly phobia we don't know about?" "Lepidopterophobia, I think it's called." He chuckles at his own knowledge of the term. "I can understand spiders, but butterflies? They're basically flying flowers." Beth shoots Jerry a glare that immediately silences him. She moves closer to Morty on the couch, her maternal instincts kicking in as she notices the genuine panic in her son's eyes. "Honey, what's wrong? It's just a commercial about butterflies." Rick doesn't immediately change the channel. Instead, he watches Morty's face with an intensity that's unusual for him. There's something in Rick's expression, not the casual dismissiveness he typically displays, but a look of genuine concern mixed with what might be guilt. His eyes narrow slightly as he studies his grandson's reaction, and for a moment, it seems like he might actually be considering how to handle this situation with sensitivity rather than sarcasm. "Rick!" Morty pleads again, his voice cracking with emotion. His entire body is trembling now. After what feels like a painfully long pause, Rick finally changes the channel. The butterfly commercial disappears, replaced by some alien cooking show. But the damage is already done. The atmosphere in the room has completely transformed from the casual, sometimes amused vibe of their interdimensional channel surfing to something tense and uncomfortable. Morty doesn't relax immediately either. He continues to breathe rapidly, his eyes darting around the room as if checking to make sure there are no butterflies about to emerge from the corners. Jerry, oblivious to the severity of what's happening, tries again to break the tension. "So I guess we know what Morty doesn't want for his birthday, a trip to the butterfly conservatory." He laughs at his own joke, but nobody joins him. Summer rolls her eyes, Beth continues to look worried, and Rick just stares at Jerry until his laughter awkwardly trails off. "Maybe we should take a break," Beth suggests, her hand still on Morty's shoulder. "Get some snacks or something?" She's trying to give Morty a chance to compose himself without directly calling attention to his distress. But Morty shakes his head, still trembling slightly. No, it's fine, I'm okay. Just not that channel again, please." He's clearly trying to act like everything is normal, but his voice still shakes and the color hasn't returned to his face. He wipes sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, trying to regain his composure but clearly struggling. Rick watches this with that same strange, uncharacteristic expression. Like he knows exactly why Morty is reacting this way and is calculating whether to address it or let it pass. Finally, he speaks, but his tone lacks its usual sarcastic edge. "Yeah, that dimension's boring anyway. Nothing but butterfly talk all day. Like watching the Nature Channel for people who hate nature documentaries but love capitalism." He deliberately changes the subject, giving Morty an opportunity to recover without scrutiny. This moment reveals that the episode isn't just about weird commercials for entertainment value. There's something deeper happening. These random glimpses into other dimensions are connecting to real experiences, real trauma that Morty has faced during his adventures with Rick. The butterfly dimension, which seems so innocent compared to the others, has triggered something specific and terrible in Morty's memory. Something that Rick seems to recognize immediately. The commercial about butterflies being used as currency serves as the emotional center of the episode. It's the moment when the random channel surfing stops being just weird entertainment and becomes a window into the psychological impact of Morty's experiences across the multiverse. The butterfly commercial acts as the key that unlocks a deeper narrative about trauma, memory, and the unseen costs of interdimensional adventures. What makes this moment so effective is the contrast between the seemingly harmless nature of the commercial and the severity of Morty's reaction. Throughout the evening, he's watched body horror, absurdist violence, and existentially disturbing content with relatively mild discomfort. But this innocent-looking butterfly commercial is what finally breaks him. It demonstrates how trauma doesn't always connect to the obviously frightening things. Sometimes the most mundane, even beautiful things can become powerful triggers when connected to traumatic experiences. As the family continues watching various interdimensional shows and commercials, Rick glances at Morty, who's still visibly shaken from seeing the butterfly currency commercial. Rick takes a casual sip from his flask before standing up and stretching. "I need to check on that experiment I've got running in the garage," he announces to no one in particular. Then he looks directly at Morty. "Could use an extra pair of hands. Come on, Morty." Morty looks up, confused at first, but something in Rick's expression makes him understand this isn't really about an experiment. He nods slightly and follows Rick out of the living room. The rest of the family barely notices, too engrossed in whatever bizarre alien cooking show is now playing on the interdimensional cable. Once they reach the garage, Rick closes the door behind them and turns to face his grandson. The usual clutter of half-finished inventions, alien specimens, and scientific equipment surrounds them. But Rick doesn't even pretend to show Morty any experiment. Instead, he leans against his workbench and studies Morty's face for a moment. The garage is quieter than the living room, with just the soft hum of Rick's various machines in the background. "So," Rick says finally, his voice lacking its usual sarcastic edge, "the butterfly dimension got to you, huh?" He doesn't phrase it as a question, but as a statement of fact. He knows exactly why Morty reacted the way he did. Morty looks down at his feet, his hands still trembling slightly. I don't understand. I don't remember ever going to a dimension with butterfly money. But when I saw that commercial, I felt like I was gonna die. Like every cell in my body was screaming to get away." He looks up at Rick, confusion and fear mixing in his expression. "What's happening to me?" Rick sighs and reaches into his lab coat, pulling out a small device that looks like a metallic pen with a small light on the end. "You don't remember because I made you forget, Morty. This is a neural memory suppressor. Point it at someone's head, press the button, and you can target specific memories for deletion." He turns the device over in his hands, not looking Morty in the eye. "After what happened in the butterfly dimension, you begged me to use it on you." Morty stares at the device, his breathing quickening again. What happened there, Rick? What did I ask you to make me forget?" Rick puts the memory suppressor down on the workbench and finally meets Morty's gaze. "It was about 3 months ago. We went to Dimension J142 for what was supposed to be a simple trading mission. Their butterfly currency is actually valuable in other dimensions because the wings contain a compound that can be refined into a powerful clean energy source." Rick runs a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of discomfort from him. "We were supposed to trade some worthless Earth technology for a few rare butterflies, make a profit selling them elsewhere. Simple in and out, 20-minute adventure." Morty nods slowly, fragments of memories beginning to surface. I remember the market. It was beautiful. All those colors." His eyes get a distant look, like he's seeing something beyond the garage walls. "Yeah, when we first got there, you loved it. The whole ecological balance thing they had going on." Rick picks up a screwdriver and fidgets with it. "But we showed up at exactly the wrong time. Just our luck, we arrived right when their economy was collapsing." Morty's eyes widen as more memories start breaking through the suppression. "The butterflies, they were dying?" Rick shakes his head grimly. "Worse. Turns out linking your entire economic system to a living species creates some pretty twisted incentives. Someone had figured out how to make counterfeit butterflies, genetically engineered ones that looked identical but cost nothing too. Produce. When people found out about the fake butterflies, everyone panicked. The entire economic system collapsed overnight." Rick's voice grows quieter. "And when money becomes worthless in a capitalism-based society." "People get desperate," Morty whispers, more memories flooding back. His face pales as the images return. "The market, it turned into a riot. People were grabbing butterflies, smashing the containers. They were eating them, Rick. Just shoving them in their mouths whole, wings and all, because they thought the real ones might still be valuable somehow." Rick nods solemnly. "It was mass hysteria, and we were stuck right in the middle of it." Morty's hands go to his head as the suppressed memories continue to break through. "There was a little girl. She had a container with just one butterfly left. This big blue one. And this man tried to take it from her." Tears begin to form in Morty's eyes. "I tried to stop him, Rick. I tried to help her." "You did help her, Morty," Rick says quietly. You got that girl out of there. You found her parents in the crowd. But the man... Morty's voice breaks. He had a knife, and he... Morty can't finish the sentence, but his hand unconsciously moves to his side, to a spot where, beneath his shirt, there would likely be a scar. Rick's expression softens in a way rarely seen. Yeah, he stabbed you. Pretty bad too. I had to use my portal gun to get us out of there fast, patch you up in another dimension with better medical technology than Earth. He puts a hand on Morty's shoulder. You almost died, Morty. And the whole time, even while you were bleeding out, all you could talk about were the butterflies. How something so beautiful had caused so much horror. How you couldn't get the image out of your head of people crushing and eating these beautiful creatures out of pure desperation. Morty wipes his eyes with the back of his hand. After I was healed, I asked you to make me forget. Rick nods. Memory suppression seemed like the easiest solution at the time. You were having nightmares every night. Couldn't look at pictures of butterflies without having panic attacks. He picks up the memory suppressor again. I could do it again, you know. Now that the memory's been triggered, I could suppress it deeper this time. You wouldn't have to remember any of this. Morty looks at the device for a long moment. The offer is tempting. To forget the horror. To not have these images in his head anymore. But he slowly shakes his head. Number I think I need to remember it, Rick. Even the bad stuff, especially the bad stuff. He takes a deep breath. If we keep erasing all the painful memories, then what's the point of any of this? What am I even learning from our adventures? Rick studies Morty's face, genuine surprise, and maybe even a hint of respect crossing his features. That's actually pretty mature of you, Morty. He puts the memory suppressor back in his pocket. For what it's worth, I'm sorry I took you there. Not every dimension is worth visiting. Some are just cautionary tales. For a moment, there's silence in the garage. Then Rick awkwardly pats Morty on the shoulder. The memories should get easier to handle now that you're processing them consciously. Brain's weird like that. Things hurt more when they're trying to break through from your subconscious. Morty nods, already feeling slightly calmer despite the disturbing memories now fully accessible to him. Thanks, Rick. For telling me the truth? Rick shrugs, already looking uncomfortable with the genuine moment they're sharing. Yeah, well, don't get used to it. But there's no real bite to his words. He gestures toward the door. You ready to go back in there? We can tell them you were helping me fix the ionic defibrillator or something. Morty takes a deep breath and nods. Yeah, I'm ready. Rick and Morty return to the living room where the rest of the family has continued watching interdimensional cable. Jerry and Summer are laughing at some alien game show with contestants that look like talking fungi, while Beth is sipping wine and looking slightly distracted. Rick flops back into his seat and grabs the remote, changing the channel to something that looks like a documentary about interdimensional travel. Morty sits down quietly, still processing what he just remembered in the garage, but looking noticeably calmer. You know, Rick says casually, pointing his flask at the screen. This episode, 60 Minutes, is actually connected to a bunch of other weird episodes in the series. He takes a swig from his flask and continues. All these random commercials and shows aren't just random stuff we made up for fun. They're windows into the infinite possibilities of the multiverse, which is basically what makes this show interesting in the first place. Summer looks over at Rick with a raised eyebrow. Are you breaking the fourth wall again? That's getting old. Rick ignores her comment and continues. Take Total Recall, for instance. Remember that time our house got infested with those memory-implanting parasites? Those aliens that could create fake memories so we'd think they were always part of our family? He gestures around the room. One minute we're sitting here like a normal family. The next we've got Sleepy Gary, Photography Raptor, and Pencil Vester convincing us they've been here the whole time. Jerry shudders visibly. I still have dreams about Sleepy Gary sometimes. Beth gives him a look, and he quickly adds, Nightmares. I meant nightmares. That episode played with the same concept as these interdimensional commercials, Rick continues. The idea that memory and reality aren't as solid as we think they are. Those parasites were creating entire fake realities in our heads, which isn't really that different from watching realities we've never been to on TV. He points to his head. Reality is just electrical signals in your brain anyway. Morty speaks up for the first time since returning from the garage. And what about Morty Night Run? That episode had some pretty weird aliens too. His voice is steadier now, more confident. Like Fart, that telepathic gas cloud that communicated through songs and weird visuals. And Krombopulos Michael, the alien assassin who just really liked killing. Rick nods approvingly at Morty. Exactly. That episode blurred the line between what's real and what's fiction for us. We had a gaseous being creating elaborate hallucinations in Morty's mind, while we dealt with an interdimensional arcade full of aliens playing games as versions of themselves. Oh my god, Roy, Summer exclaims. That game where you live an entire fake life as some random carpet salesman. I still wonder about that. Like, do those lives feel real to the people in the game? Do they know they're in a simulation? Questions like that are exactly what make these weird episodes work, Rick says, changing the channel again to land on some bizarre cooking show where the chef appears to be cooking parts of himself. They make you question reality in a way that's both funny and slightly traumatizing. Beth leans forward, getting into the conversation. What about Anatomy Park? That has to be one of the weirdest concepts ever. An amusement park built inside a homeless man's body. She shakes her head. I'm a veterinarian, and even I found that disturbing. All those rides built into organs, diseases running around as monsters, and that weird hepatitis A character. Pirates of the Pancreas was actually a pretty solid ride concept, Rick mutters defensively. Anatomy Park was a perfect example of taking something disgusting and making it entertaining. Kinda like this whole show, really. I liked the Ricklantis mix-up, Jerry offers, clearly trying to be part of the conversation. All those different Ricks and Mortys living in the Citadel, each with their own stories. Cop Rick and Cop Morty, factory worker Rick, school Mortys. It was like watching a bunch of different TV shows about versions of the same characters. Rick points his flask at Jerry. Even a broken Jerry is right twice a day. That episode explored alternate versions of ourselves in increasingly disturbing scenarios. It showed how even with the same basic DNA and starting point, small changes in circumstance can create completely different people. He looks at Morty. Some versions of us are heroes, some are villains. Most are somewhere in the murky middle. I think these weird episodes are actually my favorites, Morty says thoughtfully. Like the really bizarre ones that don't make sense at first but then hit you with something real underneath all the weirdness. He looks around at his family. Sometimes the weirdness helps make the difficult parts of life easier to handle, you know? Like, if you can laugh at something completely absurd, it makes the regular painful stuff seem less overwhelming. This comment hangs in the air for a moment. The family seems surprised by Morty's insight, especially given his earlier distress. Beth looks at her son with a mixture of pride and concern, while Rick gives him an approving nod. That's actually pretty deep, Morty, Summer says, putting her phone down for the first time all evening. I never really thought about it that way, but you're right. After you've watched a man pull his own skin off because he likes personal space, your own problems don't seem so bad. Jerry laughs. Remember that time we had to evacuate Earth because Rick turned everyone into Cronenbergs? That was pretty weird. But we found a new reality where we were already dead and just took over our own lives. He looks around. I think about that a lot, actually. Are we even the original Smiths anymore? Jerry, we've been over this, Rick sighs. Original, replacement, it doesn't matter. There are infinite versions of us across infinite dimensions. The labels are meaningless. But it does matter to us, Beth counters. Our experiences make us who we are, even the weird ones. Maybe especially the weird ones. She looks at Morty. Like Morty said, sometimes the weirdness helps us process the difficult stuff. The family falls into a comfortable silence for a moment, watching as Rick flips through more bizarre interdimensional channels. The tension from earlier has dissipated, replaced by a sense of shared understanding. Even though they've all experienced these strange adventures differently, talking about them together has created a connection. You know what's really weird when you think about it? Morty says finally. Us. Just sitting here together, watching TV. After everything we've seen and done across the multiverse, sometimes the most surreal thing is just being a normal family for a few hours. Rick looks at Morty with what might almost be mistaken for pride. That's the trick to surviving in an infinite multiverse, Morty. Finding the familiar in the strange and recognizing the strange in the familiar. He raises his flask in a mock toast to weirdness in all its forms. The family mimics his toast with their own drinks, and they settle back into watching the increasingly bizarre shows on interdimensional cable. But now there's something different about the atmosphere. The shared conversation about their experiences has transformed the random channel surfing into something more meaningful. The weird episodes they've discussed have become a common language, a way for this unconventional family to understand each other and process their unusual lives together. As the night wears on, the Smith family continues watching the interdimensional cable. But something strange starts to happen. The channels Rick flips through are still bizarre. A commercial for interdimensional cereal that turns your insides into a water park. A reality show where furniture comes to life and judges human decorating choices. A news broadcast where the anchors are just disembodied mouths floating in jars of blue liquid. But the family's reactions have changed. Instead of the shocked gasps and uncomfortable laughter from earlier, they've all settled into a relaxed, almost sleepy state. Jerry has his feet up on the coffee table. Beth's head is resting on his shoulder. Summer's phone has slipped from her hand onto the couch, and even Morty, after his earlier panic, looks calm and comfortable. Rick notices this collective mellowing and nods knowingly. "This happens every time," he says, his voice lower and less manic than usual. First phase of interdimensional cable viewing is shock. Everything seems crazy and disturbing. Second phase is analysis, trying to make sense of it all. But if you stick with it long enough, you hit the third phase, adaptation. He gestures to the family with his flask. Your brains have accepted that nothing makes sense, so they've stopped trying to process it logically. After enough exposure to weird stuff, your neural pathways basically give up and start finding comfort in the strangeness. Beth lifts her head slightly from Jerry's shoulder. "That actually makes sense," she says through a yawn. "It's like how white noise eventually helps you sleep because your brain stops trying to identify individual sounds." She settles back against Jerry, her eyelids growing heavy. "But these shows aren't just noise. They're all weird in different ways." "Exactly," Rick continues, his voice taking on that rare tone he uses when explaining something he finds genuinely interesting rather than just showing off his knowledge. "The human brain is exceptionally good at finding patterns. That's how we survived as a species. When your ancestors heard a rustle in the bushes, they assumed it was a predator, not a random breeze. But when you expose your brain to truly random, patternless stimuli, for long enough, it creates a unique effect." He points to the screen where a commercial shows a creature that's half giraffe, half toaster selling insurance. Your pattern recognition systems eventually just tap out. They surrender. And that surrender state is actually really similar to meditation or pre-sleep brainwaves. The rest of the family listens to Rick's explanation with half-lidded eyes. Even Jerry, who usually challenges or questions Rick's explanations, just nods along, too relaxed to argue. On screen, the colors have grown softer somehow, the harsh neons and jarring contrasts of the earlier commercials giving way to more pastel, dreamy hues. The animation itself seems gentler, with smoother transitions between scenes and less frantic movement. It's not clear if this is an actual change in the content they're watching, or just how their tired brains are perceiving it. In some dimensions, Rick continues, his own speech slowing slightly, they actually prescribe weird TV as a sleep aid. There's this planet called Gazorpazorp, where they have these special channels that just show increasingly strange and impossible things specifically designed to short-circuit your analytical mind. He takes a small sip from his flask, rather than his usual gulp. Think about it. When you see something that makes no sense, your brain works overtime trying to understand it. But eventually, if the weird stuff keeps coming, your brain just lets go, stops trying. And that letting go is basically the same mental state as falling asleep. Morty, who had been traumatized by the butterfly currency commercial earlier, now watches the screen with heavy eyelids and a slight smile. The memories that had surfaced in the garage with Rick are still there, but they've lost their sharp edges. The panic has transformed into something like acceptance. "You know what's weird?" he says quietly. "I feel better about the butterfly thing now. Not because I forgot it again, but because everything else we've watched is so strange that it just seems like one more weird thing in a weird universe. He yawns and sinks deeper into the couch cushions. It doesn't feel as personal anymore. Summer nods slowly, her eyes barely open. That's what I like about Rick and Morty's adventures. They're so bizarre that my own problems seem boring in comparison. She smiles sleepily. Like, who cares if Brandon didn't text me back when there's a dimension where people use sentient mailboxes to communicate and the mailboxes are all going through a civil war? The TV now shows something that looks like a documentary about planets that are actually sleeping organisms. The narrator speaks in a soothing, almost hypnotic tone, explaining how these massive space beings dream the realities that their inhabitants experience. It should be a mind-bending concept, but the family watches with heavy eyelids and relaxed expressions, the existential implications washing over them without causing any distress. You know what's really surprising, Jerry says through a yawn, is that I'm actually feeling really calm right now. Even though like 2 hours ago, we watched a guy literally tear his own skin off because he wanted personal space. He stretches his arms above his head. Normally that would give me nightmares for weeks. But now it just seems kind of, I don't know, normal? Not normal, but acceptable? The absurdity threshold, Rick mumbles, himself starting to sound sleepy. Once you cross it, everything becomes equally reasonable and unreasonable at the same time. His eyelids droop. It's actually a useful psychological state. Helps you deal with trauma. When everything is bizarre, nothing is bizarre. The lights in the living room seem to have dimmed, though no one remembers turning them down. The glow from the TV washes over the family in soft waves of color. The interdimensional broadcast now showing something that looks like abstract patterns forming and dissolving. Creatures that couldn't exist in three-dimensional space gently morphing into landscapes that follow impossible geometries. It should be disturbing, but instead, it's mesmerizing, almost beautiful in its complete abandonment of logic and natural law. Morty's eyes close fully for a moment, then open halfway. I think I get it now, he says, his voice thick with approaching sleep. These weird episodes of Rick and Morty aren't just weird for the sake of being weird. They're weird because the universe is weird. Reality is weird. And once you accept that, it's actually kind of peaceful. His head tilts to rest against the back of the couch. Like, if nothing makes sense anyway, then I don't have to worry so much about trying to make sense of everything. The family murmurs in agreement, too comfortable to form full responses. The bizarre imagery on screen continues to shift and flow, but they're barely watching it now. Their minds have surrendered to the strangeness, and in that surrender, they've found a peculiar kind of peace. It's the paradox of Rick and Morty's weirdest episodes. The very chaos and absurdity that should keep viewers on edge has instead become the perfect lullaby, a surreal bedtime story that comforts precisely because it abandons all pretense of making sense. The interdimensional cable continues playing its strange visions from across the multiverse, but the Smith family is drifting now, hovering in that peaceful place between wakefulness and dreams, where the strangest Rick and Morty episodes make perfect sense, and the multiverse doesn't seem so scary after all. The interdimensional TV continues to play its bizarre commercials, but nobody's watching anymore. The entire Smith family is now fast asleep on the couch, their faces peaceful despite the weird imagery flickering across the screen. Beth's head rests on Jerry's shoulder. Summer's curled up at one end of the couch, and Morty's head has dropped onto a cushion. Rick, still awake, surveys his sleeping family with a rare expression of contentment. He quietly reaches over and adjusts a blanket over Morty's shoulders, a small gesture of affection he'd probably deny if anyone saw it. Finally, Rick's own eyes grow heavy, and he drifts off to sleep amid the strange glow of the TV.